You guys are not gonna guess what just happened. the reason that I'm 20 minutes late for this live stream is because for the last 20 minutes I thought we were live, and I've been going strong. But it's good. We had a good rehearsal, and now the real thing is hopefully happening. Are we? Because I was asking if anyone was out there watching, and I wasn't getting a response, and I just assumed that we were still live. But it seems like we're live now. I'm getting a response to what I'm saying, and that makes a lot more sense. Awesome. Because I was asking about like what's the stream look like, how's the audio, no one was saying anything. By the way, hello to Miran, I see you in the chat. Ogniv, welcome. What's up? Great to see you here. All right, we're getting feedback that we're live. This is good. How's the music is still playing? Great. Is it? Oh, it's louder than me. Okay. I'm flying blind with the music, by the way, because I don't have headphones on. It's coming through my speakers because I wanted to not wear headphones. Okay, lowering the music. Music is too high. Got it. How's this? How's this? Happy New Year, by the way. 2026 is here. Anyone have any good New Year's resolutions? Sorry that I'm late. I was doing a little unknown rehearsal. Oh, thank you, Sarah. It's good. Is it too low? Okay, well, I'm not gonna have it playing the whole time. Y'all, I've been having a great private rehearsal for this stream, unbeknownst to me. But I'm actually happy because I got some of the. I think I'll do a better job now that I've had a little rehearsal. Your resolution is to do more Blender. Well, I think that's great. I think that's a really good resolution. What kind of stuff do you want to make with Blender? You wanna learn 3D, but you're scared of AI. I feel that, but you can still learn 3D because it's fun. Even if AI is a thing, it's a heck of a lot of fun. Oh, I say hi back. Is the music still too loud? Finish that scene, you got this. By the way, today we are going to be working on making this visual effects shot from start to finish, and it's going to be a good time. We're going to go through the full 3D VFX workflow in Blender, and also, yes, the stream will be available later after this finishes. So if it's super late for you, thanks for being here, but totally get some sleep. It's the new year. You got to be rested going into the new year, and tune in after it's posted. I am completely ditching the modeling Blender and opting for VFX. Sweet. It looks like we're doing good here. By the way, can I just show you guys something fun that I set up here with the stream? Check this out. Isn't that crazy? Hello. Welcome to the stream. Talk about VFX. This is live. This is live. Also, it's really cool if I add a little filter to this and I increase the saturation or the hue. I shift the hue ever so slightly. Watch, this is crazy. You might, if you're photosensitive, this is your warning. Whoa! Yeah. Also, it's very cool if I clearly have been playing with this for a long time. Look at this. Crazy. Super cool, super fun. Could do this all day. You're rendering the night car scene? For those of you that don't know, I'll take this off so it's not as crazy. I have a Blender VFX course, and it'll be 50% off tomorrow in less than 24 hours. If you're curious to get the course, this is a good time to do it because it'll never be this discounted ever again. And also, the 50% discount is only for the first 100 people that buy the course. So if you want the details for the sale, click the second link in the description and I'll email you the details. And the workflow that I'll be showing you today is the workflow that we do a deep dive on in the course. So this will be kind of an overview of what the course focuses on. Kyle, what's up? Good to see you. Polyfjord, what's up? Good to see you here. All right. So as people kind of file in, I want to first start with like a high-level overview of the workflow and the steps that we're going to be going through today to create this VFX shot. And so we're going to start, well, I already started by filming this footage, and then the next step after that, let me turn off my notifications here. Tony's in the chat. Let's go. By the way, if this stream is janky, I'm not looking at the right place half the time. It's because I'm still figuring out how to run all this, and there's a lot of moving parts. And I have a lot of respect for people that live stream because this is a lot to keep track of. And I also now understand why people have the little stream decks to like change views. So thank you for embracing the jank with me as I figured all this out. Let's go through all of the different steps here that we're gonna go through today. So we're gonna start here at footage preparation. And that's going to begin in, oh, by the way, the music that you're hearing is playing with this app called Samply. And I just wanna plug this because my friend made this. If you're making music, and you want to share and collaborate with other people, Samply is the best way to do that. So definitely check that out. They have a great free plan. And okay, footage preparation. Let's get into it. I do all my footage prep in DaVinci Resolve. So here you'll see the original shot that I filmed for this. We had a nice foggy morning here about a week ago, and I was super inspired. It looked super cinematic. And I just got a new camera, which is what you're seeing right here. And so I went out early and filmed this, and then later decided this might be some cool footage to add some VFX to. So footage preparation basically involves using some program to convert our footage into the working color space that we're going to use for the project. And so basically the working color space is just a unified color space that all of our visual effects elements, our footage, anything that we're using visually can live in this unified working color space so that when we apply certain effects, they look physically accurate. And that's a concept that it's a color management concept. And I dive into that very deeply in the course. And it'll be hard to explain here today, but I'll show you some of the buttons that I'm pushing at least to prepare this footage here in DaVinci Resolve. The second step is going to be camera tracking. And so I tend to do that here in Blender. And let's see, different Blender, this Blender, great. So camera tracking is basically the process where we add a bunch of 2D tracking markers that track different patterns in our footage, different points in our footage. And if we add enough of these, we're able to have Blender understand the 3D motion of our camera. And we get this virtual 3D camera that moves in the exact same way as the original camera that we were filming with. And so that's the camera tracking process. We'll go through that today. Happy New Year. I'm gonna try and get back to looking at the chat here in a little bit. So that's camera tracking. And then we're gonna go to camera layout. So basically, once we do camera tracking, we have our camera that lives in our 3D world, and we need to decide where this camera is going to be placed. Is it gonna be rotated this way? Is it gonna be scaled this way? Because really we can place this camera anywhere and the motion is going to be accurate. But there's really a position, a rotation, and a scale for this camera in relation to the 3D grid, the 3D coordinate system in Blender that makes most sense. And so we're gonna work on finding the layout for the camera, and basically that just makes it easier to add in objects to our 3D scene so that they're aligned with the coordinate system, so that they're at the right scale. We can use real world units when we're setting the scale of different objects. So camera layout is a really important process, one that is easy to skip over if you're just getting into this workflow, but I'll show you how that works here today. Then we go from camera layout into reconstruction. So reconstruction is basically the process of recreating the objects that were in the original footage. And you usually don't have to recreate all of the 3D objects. So for this scene, the reconstruction process consisted of adding in a ground plane. That's pretty standard, very easy. And then I also reconstructed the cars, and I'll show you how I did this. I did not model these cars. I found these for free, and I'll show you how I lined these up and put these in the proper position. So finally, we go into, sorry, I'm hitting the wrong slides here, lighting and materials. And so this is the last step. Like the first part of this 3D VFX workflow is all about recreating the real world as a virtual 3D environment. So we recreated the motion of the camera, the geometry of the scene, and now we're gonna recreate the lighting and the materials of the actual things that were in our original environment. And so for this scene, the lighting process was pretty simple. Usually I like to have an HDRI of the location, which I create using a 360 camera. But when I filmed this, I didn't think to bring my 360 camera with me. So for this shot, we're just gonna recreate this all by eye. But it's pretty simple. All I had to do is recreate these street lights. And then for the materials, I just created a material for the ground that roughly matched what I think a concrete material would look like. And you can be pretty rough with the materials I found in a lot of cases. So yeah, that's lighting and materials. Next we go into, gosh, keep clicking the wrong thing. Adding in the VFX elements. So for this scene, we had this sci-fi container, and yeah, that was it. I didn't create this. I'm not the best at modeling or texturing assets. So that's why I work with people that are really good at that. Or I find free models online. I'll show you where I found all these models and how I brought them into the scene today. Then we go into rendering and compositing. And so by default, if we go into our rendered view here, you'll see that we see a lot of things that we probably don't want in our final VFX shot. If I hide the footage, we're seeing the ground, we're seeing all the cars. And so the rendering and compositing process is, it's basically a process of going from this full 3D scene and figuring out how to extract just the elements that we want to include in our final composite. So in this case, we want to just render out this sci-fi object, this power generator, and then we want to extract the shadows and the lighting that's on the ground here. And then we also want to extract the light that is falling on the car from this generator. And so the rendering and compositing process for this shot is going to be a little bit more advanced, but hopefully, you know, whatever level you're at, you can take something out of it today. And yeah, we'll get into compositing. I like to do compositing in Blender, even if that's not where I do my final composite. I'm usually doing at least a rough composite in Blender as I set up the render. for the final shot, because it's just a really good way to know whether I'm rendering out the right elements with the right settings. And so I actually did wind up doing the final composite for this shot in Blender. And so we'll do that today as well. And then the final step, it will be color grading. And so we're gonna do color grading inside of DaVinci Resolve. I'll show you how to export the shot from Blender. We'll bring it into DaVinci Resolve, and I didn't really change the colors on this shot very much. I added some lens flares, some very subtle lens flares, but I'll show you kind of the color grading process if you do want to push your grade a little bit more. We'll get into that. So that's the full workflow. And we're gonna try and do that all in the stream. I have no idea, you know, if I've cut out too large of a task here, if we'll be able to even finish this before my bedtime. It's not that late here right now, but I'm gonna go back through the chat here. Drop the playlist. I will drop the playlist. Let me grab that for you right now. Let me share. And you guys can experience Samply for yourself. Hopefully this works. Happy New Year, Happy New Year. What GPU am I using? I am on a MacBook M1, whatever GPU that is. Music is a bit distracting. It is not needed. I agree with you. We should probably just turn it down a lot or off when we actually get into the serious flow state. I got the GH7, which I'm very excited about. It can film in RAW directly to the CFast Express card, which is awesome. Is Eevee possible to use for a VFX shot? That's a great question. Eevee is definitely great for VFX. Well, okay. Sorry, I should think. It's great for rendering certain render passes. So things that don't have a visual output. So like data passes, like a cryptomat pass or a vector pass. If you forget to render those with cycles, it's really easy to switch to Eevee and render those out quickly. So, yeah. How's what's the vote on the music? Should I just turn it off completely? What are we thinking? It is kind of intense, and I don't really have another playlist prepared that is less intense than this. Okay. By the way, if you're just tuning in, my Blender VFX course will be 50% off tomorrow, but that's only for the first 100 people that buy it. This is the website, inlightvfx.com. You can check out the details for the course. When you get into the course, this is what it looks like. We got our core lessons that go over the main steps of the workflow. You can see these are the steps we just went over: footage preparation, camera tracking, camera layout, reconstruction, and then some other stuff that we didn't talk about. But these are lessons that I've spent the last year and a half pouring my soul into. If you've seen my main YouTube channel, I love to animate graphics to explain things, and so I put a lot of that same energy into this course to really make it as good as it can be. And I'm very proud of it. Click the link in the description if you're interested in the sale. Enter your email and I'll send you the details for that. And yeah. There are no ways to make payments in installments yet. But that is something I've been considering. So I appreciate you expressing your interest in that. Okay, let's get into this. You guys can keep entering in your questions and comments. Love to see everyone here. Let me check the The stream health looks like we're doing good. I'm going to pause the music, and we're gonna get into it. So, by the way, if you want to follow along with this, I put the footage, the download for the footage is in the description. Enter your email. I'll email the footage to you. But to start, we're gonna kind of back up a little bit. The footage that I gave you is an export that I made from DaVinci Resolve, and so we're gonna do the work in DaVinci Resolve right now. But you don't need to do this part essentially. So here we have our footage. It is log footage, which basically means it's flat. It's really good because we can easily use color management to convert this into our working color space, which for this project, we're going to be using Linear Rec 2020. And Blender 5.0 has some really good color management changes that are going to help us along the way. By the way, we have shortcuts down here that should be showing up. And so basically, we import our footage into DaVinci Resolve. We go into the color page. We're going to go into the library and look for a color space transform node. And in this case, we're going from Panasonic vGamut. And I just start typing the word and it shows up. And we're going to go into Rec 2020 for our gamut. And our transfer function is going to be linear. So we're going from our camera's color space into the working color space for this project. And we don't want any tone mapping when we're going into the working color space, and the rest of these settings look good. And so you might hear people call this a input color space transform, or CST-in. And we can create an output color space transform. And actually we'll just copy and paste the settings from the first node here. And we're going to go from Linear Rec 2020, our working color space, into our output or display color space. And so I like to use Rec 709 Gamma 2.2. And when we go from our working color space to our display color space, we're going from a high dynamic range to a standard or lower dynamic range. And so whenever we go in that direction, we want to do some tone mapping. So I'll turn on the DaVinci tone mapping method, which works pretty well here in DaVinci Resolve. Use that custom max input of 10,000, and we want to make sure apply forward OOTF is checked. And so now we've converted our footage from our camera's color space into the working color space and then out to the display color space. And the reason we did this is so that now we can mute this output color space transform. We can turn this off by hitting Command or Control D. And now our footage is in the working color space. And it looks terrible, and that's because we're not using an output color space transform. But this is the first step, is we want to create an export of this footage in the working color space. So we come to the delivery page, we click on the clip, hit X to set the in and out point to just this clip, choose EXR as the format, we can choose DWAA for the codec, and then we export this out of DaVinci Resolve. And so that's what I gave you guys in the link in the description. You're getting this EXR sequence, which is in that working color space, Linear Rec 2020. And then in addition to this, sometimes I will also make an export of our shot in the display color space. So I'll turn this back on. I'll come back to the delivery page, choose a format like MP4, and I'll export this just to use sometimes for camera tracking, or just if I want to pull up the shot in my file explorer and be able to play it more easily. It's nice to have the colors in the display color space in a format that you can easily play from your file explorer. And so that's the footage preparation process. To really understand this full process, you have to dive deep into color management, and that's something we do in the course. So, and I also have some videos on my main channel, this channel, I guess, about color management that can help you figure out why we're choosing these different settings. So yeah, we're gonna go on to camera tracking next. Blender's distortion node gives you nightmares. Yeah, we'll get to that. It has been giving me nightmares as well, and we'll talk about why that is. Any reason I'm using Rec 2020 instead of Aces? Great question. It's kind of a habit that I developed before. So Blender just had an update, Blender 5.0, big update, new version number, and there's some really great color management updates where you can change the working color space right inside of Blender. And so now that makes it really easy to work in Aces or Linear Rec 2020. Basically, you can choose Aces or Linear Rec 2020. They're very similar. Linear Rec 2020 I think it contains less imaginary color data. If you look at the gamut of Rec 2020 versus Aces CG AP0, I think it is. I think Linear Rec 2020 contains more reasonable color values. I have this written up as an article, but basically you can use whichever you like. As long as the main thing you want to be doing is working in a color space that has a larger gamut than, say, Rec 709. Rec 709 is a pretty small gamut. It used to be the default, and I think it still might be the default in Blender, but we want to work in a larger gamut than that to give our colors more room for more intense values, and it just leads to more photorealistic results. So Aces CG or Linear Rec 2020 will give you both those things. So great question. Okay, let's get into camera tracking. Keep the good questions coming. And we're going to head into Blender. Let's open up our motion tracking tab. And we're going to, I should probably show you Blender. There we go. And I'm going to close these areas. And we're just going to open up the EXR sequence that I provided for you. And here in Blender, I have the color space set to Linear Rec 2020 for this footage. And again, that's because we exported this from DaVinci Resolve in Linear Rec 2020. And then in our settings down here, I got to make sure you can see this. In color management, we have set, I actually have like a piece of paper on my monitor to make sure that I'm not putting things where you can't see them because I'm here in the stream. But I think I might actually just have to move myself here for a quick second. There we go. You want to set, and now I can't see it because, okay, I'm going to remove the paper on my monitor. Okay, working color space is going to be set to Linear Rec 2020. Our view transform is set to AGX. It's going to give us some nice tone mapping, and we're set to do some camera tracking. Let's go back over here. Woo! Moving all around. Okay, set the seam frames, hit prefetch to load this into the cache, and we're going to add some tracking markers. So I want to increase the default size of these tracking markers, and I'll hit Option S to see the search box. This is basically where Blender is going to look for the pattern that we're tracking. And I'm going to choose the affine motion model, set this to normalize, and I'm going to lock our tracker to the viewport. And then let's just track this forward and backwards. And if we scrub through, having this locked just provides an easier way to see if we have a good track. And so we're just going to add a bunch of tracking markers around the scene. Now you might be asking, why not use some of the new tracking workflows like glow map, coal map? I forget the names of them, and I think they're really cool. But honestly, for simple shots like this, well, I just love doing manual camera tracking, as crazy as that might sound. And you'll see this is really not going to be too difficult. For both simple shots and more advanced shots where you might actually need to do manual camera tracking, I'm all for the automatic stuff. But if you're not in a rush, why not just enjoy the process? Okay. Now what you'll see I'm doing throughout as I'm tracking these markers is sometimes they'll stop prematurely, and oftentimes that's because the search box is not big enough. So you'll see at this point the pattern kind of hits the edges of the search box, and so I'm just creating, I'm making it bigger at this frame, and then if I hit Command T, that allows me to track for the rest of the shot. And so the idea in this camera tracking process is just to put tracking markers at different parts of your shot, different depths. You want to give Blender a really good sense of parallax. And so maybe I'll try and track something farther away, like the stop sign. It looks good. Track the back of this car. Very nice. And we want a lot of tracking markers on the ground because that's where our main VFX elements are going to live, and we want to make sure our ground plane is set accurately. Now here you'll see a tracking marker that ended, and it doesn't seem to be an issue with the search box, and I still feel like this could go for longer. So a little cheat is you can just hit S to scale this up a little bit on this frame where it failed, and then that should allow you to track a little bit longer. This one's putting up a fuss, so maybe we'll just get rid of that one and track a different point. Here, I'll scale that up. And then as we get closer to the edge, we can just make this smaller. Because the main thing that you want to focus on when you're doing camera tracking is just where the center of the marker is. It doesn't really matter the scale of the marker. As long as that center point is staying consistent throughout the shot, that's all that matters. That's the only data that Blender really takes into consideration once we do the camera solve process and we tell Blender to guess the 3D motion of this camera that we're tracking. You're not seeing the lock icon up here? Interesting. Maybe make sure that if you right click this top area, you have show header, show menus. I'm not sure. All right. Don't be afraid to make some large tracking markers. It might take a little bit longer, but if the pattern requires it, then that's totally cool. All right. Just want to track stuff here in the beginning of the shot. I could probably be doing this faster just by adding a lot more here. But I do, for a scene like this, I find that you only need a few good supervised tracks to get a solid result. And so that's kind of why, you know, you'll see some people do the method where you can detect features. And I do that sometimes, but oftentimes I find that the time that you save by detecting features automatically, you pay for that by having to clean up a lot of tracking markers. I mean, sometimes it can work really well. It just depends on the scene. And I like to show the full manual process just so you can really understand what's happening at the core of this workflow. And wherever you want to automate things, that's great. Make it faster for yourself. I totally believe in not wasting times on things that you don't enjoy. But again, I find an odd enjoyment from just watching markers stick in the right place. How's the audio levels on my voice, by the way? Hopefully that is sounding decent. All right, we need to track some stuff maybe farther away. All right, a few more markers, then I think we'll be good to go into the camera solve step. Let's see, can we get one on this stop sign? That would be a good amount of depth to capture. And that's looking pretty bad, so we won't do that. Let's see if we can get like this car back here. No, that's not good. Oh, this is good. There we go. And I actually might scale this down right there. Get another one here. Maybe I'll track this side. Nice. Ooh, not good, not good. Here we have a nice corner. Kind of gets hidden, so we'll delete the beginning of this, track the rest. It really does not like that. All right. Oh, there we go. Let's just make sure this is good. Sorry, guys and girls and everyone in between. This is a boring part of the process to watch. Okay, this looks good. Let's try solving this. Mario, what's up? Good to see you here. A VFX stream to start the new year. What better way to start the new year than with some VFX in Blender? I agree. Let's go to our Solve tab. We are going to, let's go from frame 15. These keyframes, basically, the way I understand it, you want to pick a part of the shot that represents a good amount of camera movement and parallax. But you need to choose a frame range where there are 8 tracking markers active for the full range, or else Blender's gonna get mad at you. And I want Blender to calculate the focal length and the distortion of this shot. Now, oftentimes I would enter this in manually, and there's a lot more precise ways to figure this out, and I go over that in my course. But for this shot, I have a new camera, a new lens, didn't have time to capture I know what focal length it was, but I want to show you the way to use Blender's tools here to calculate these things automatically if you don't want to be as precise and you want to do this more quickly. So let's solve the camera motion. We get a solve error of 0.3. That's great. It's pretty low. Let's look at what our lens distortion looks like, and that looks reasonable. I'm not seeing any crazy distortion that doesn't look plausible. So I'm thinking we have a good track on our hands. We can always look at our graph down here for any markers that seem really weird at any points. For example, this one kind of gets squashed at the end, so we'll delete the tail of this, and then we can resolve. And that doesn't really do much. We can also go to the dope sheet, and this will show our tracking markers in order of their solve error. So if we go to our display and we turn on the info, you'll see each of these markers after we click solve camera motion, it gets an error value. It's basically how confident Blender is that this is a good tracking marker and how much does it rely on this tracking marker to inform the solution of the camera. And so the higher this error, the worse. And so we have this one up here that has the highest error, but that's still only at 0.5, which is not very high. And I like that where this tracking marker is located, that's going to be helpful when we place this light in our shot. So I'm going to keep this around. Some people, go crazy deleting any tracking marker that has the highest error. But if your error is already low, you don't really have to worry about deleting ones with high error, in my opinion, unless they're crazy high and they're super different from the rest of your tracking markers. Lens grid distortion data and a denoise would help. Yes, definitely lens grids are the way to figure out your lens distortion. I show that in the course. And denoising is good too. Didn't do that for this shot. but denoising in DaVinci Resolve is definitely helpful, not only for camera tracking, but also for compositing. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna go from camera tracking to some layout. Tracking in black and white is really good to figure out good tracking points. Yeah, for sure. You can click this black and white thing and see the tracking markers and the patterns that way. It's a good tip. Okay, so let's see how this solve worked out for all of us. And oh, what are we doing? What are we doing? There we go. We're back. I want OBS on this screen. Okay, sorry. Thank you for putting up with my new streamer antics. Okay, let's set this as a background and let's click Setup Tracking Scene. And now we'll see if we go to our layout page, we get this camera. I'm going to delete the cube. I'm going to also drag the camera out here, delete these collections and objects. And we're going to delete this other view layer that Blender creates for us. And let's hit 0 to look through the camera and see how things are looking. And this looks pretty good. I can move the camera around. Sometimes before I do camera layout, I like to put this grid going right into the camera view, and that allows me to see if there's any weird camera jitter in the foreground of the scene. And I can increase the opacity on this footage, and also, let's see, I'm not seeing this is a weird thing that Blender doesn't really tone map the footage in the background sometimes. But, so that's why it looks terrible. But that's not a problem. We're just trying to judge the quality of the camera track here. And this looks pretty good. Now we need to do some camera layout because this grid should probably be aligned with the floor in this scene. So let's go back to the motion tracking tab and let's select some of our tracking markers, and we'll select 3 of them. And then the third one that we select, if we use this set floor button, the third tracking marker will be set as the origin of your scene. And you'll see what I mean by that. If that doesn't make sense, you'll see what I mean by that. So this is I'll set this as the origin of my scene for now, and I'll click the floor button. And what that's going to do is that's going to put these 3 tracking markers on the floor grid. That's going to move the camera essentially. Well, here, let me just show you this. So you can see this in real time. I'll create 2 windows here. You'll see these are the 3 tracking markers that I've selected here. And you can view those in the 3D view by turning on the motion tracking overlays. And so when I click set floor, it's going to move this camera so that these 3 tracking markers are flat on the XY plane, this floor plane. It's going to set that third tracking marker to the origin point. So you'll see it's going to put that tracking marker at the origin. And then it's also going to set the X-axis so that it runs through 2 of the tracking markers. And so you'll see that happen here. Boom. That kind of switched the rotation of the camera. But if I undo that and redo that, you'll see how that works. We have that third tracking marker at the origin. The X-axis runs through the origin point, that third tracking marker. And I think it aligns with the second tracking marker that you selected. Not really sure on that. It seems to be a bit random. But now, if we look through the camera, this ground plane is lining up a lot better. I can also go in from the side view, turn on the motion tracking, and I want to see that these points, these ground plane points, are all kind of level on the ground. And I can select those more easily here so that they are highlighted in our viewport. So these are all the ground points. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Shift S, cursor to world origin, and then I'm going to set the pivot point to the 3D cursor. So now if I rotate this camera, it rotates around that origin point. And this just makes it really easy to come into the side view, and I can rotate the camera just trying to get these markers to be all flat. And they were already pretty good to start with. So the next thing we want to do is rotate the camera so that this x-axis aligns with the road. I think that's probably a good thing to line up with. So I'm going to go into the camera view and I'm going to hit R and Z, and I'm still rotating around that 3D cursor, which is at the origin. And I just rotated this so that the positive x-axis is pointing towards the camera. That's just kind of a standard thing I like to do when I set up my camera layout. And I'm going to rotate this. This is a little bit hard to see. One thing I can do is I can add in a ground plane and set the origin here, and I can scale this up to make this x-axis a little bit easier to see. There's probably way better ways to do this, changing the UI, but oh, and now I'm not even going to be able to, whatever. We'll do this. Well, actually, that did make it a little bit easier to see. Nice. Something like that looks good. And I can scale this. Oh, my cursor is no longer at the origin. Whoa. All right. I can scale this up. Let's rotate this. Seems like this is lining up pretty well. Nice. Now at this point, if you want to change the origin of your camera so that it's not located here but somewhere else, we can totally do that. But since we've basically set the height of the camera where we want it, and so I can hit G and then Shift Z so that we're not changing the height of the camera, and that allows me to shift where the origin is in the scene. So maybe I can put this somewhere a little bit more centrally located, somewhere like that. All right. So that looks pretty good. Let's increase the opacity here and just check. I'm just looking at the grid, looking at the ground, trying to make sure that things aren't slipping. Also make sure that in your camera settings, render undistorted is checked. Otherwise, your grid is going to probably be slipping a little bit depending on how much lens distortion you have. But this is looking good. So I think we've set the position, we've set the rotation. The last thing we need to do is set the proper scale of our camera. Because currently, if we add a cube into the scene, let's go into solid view. This cube is 2 by 2 by 2 in the item properties, and that looks too big right now for our scene. So to set the scale, in this particular project, the scale is not super important. I mean, yeah, you want to set the scale as closely as possible. It makes you can use real world units to set the location of different objects. So for this scene, to set the scale, all I did was I came to, by the way, this is the link that you'll see. Why is this not showing? I gotta restart this screen capture. Oh, I'm looking at, okay, we're good. This is the, where you can get the footage to follow along. And also, as I mentioned earlier, to recreate the cars in this scene, I didn't actually model these myself. I found a free model on BlenderKit, and that's linked here, this third link. Let me actually open that in a new tab. And if you have the BlenderKit add-on installed, you can just hit copy search term, and then back in Blender, they have this really cool system where you can just drag the car or the model into your scene. It's a little bit laggy when you do that. I don't know if that's just me, but that's been a thing I've been experiencing. Size matters when it comes to scaling your camera. Absolutely. Okay, so we have the car in our scene, and this is going to help us set the scene scale. Again, this is not as precise as I would usually like to be, but I didn't really take any measurements when I was on set because, again, when I was filming this footage, I wasn't prepared to add any VFX to it. I was just filming for fun. But here we have this car in the scene, and if we look into the camera view, this looks a bit too large. So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna use this to set the scale of our camera. So let's put this back at the origin, and let's rotate this just like this. Why am I doing that so imprecisely? Let's go rotate C, 90, -90. Okay, go into the wireframe view. We'll take down the opacity of these wireframes. And basically, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set the 3D cursor to the base of this car. That should be on the ground plane. Yes, it is. Good. And then I'm going to be still rotating around that 3D cursor, and I'm going to select the camera, and now I'm going to scale the camera from that 3D cursor point. And I'm just trying to get this car roughly to the right scale. And then what I can do is I can select the car and the camera together, and I can hit G, Shift Z to kind of reset the origin point of this scene. And now let me turn up the opacity of our car. Still in the ground plane. Yeah, so this is one way you could set the scale. Another thing we could do is we could also just estimate like how far, you know, the size of this area here. We can add a plane. Let's say this is probably like 5 feet. So I'm going to come into the properties here, change our Y dimension to 5. And you can see since we've rescaled the camera, this is pretty close. I'll just scale this. Actually, yeah. All we have to do is get close for this shot. That's great. Wonderful. Okay. So we've set the camera position, we've set the rotation, we've set the scale. We're done with camera layout. Fantastic. Fusion Brew, good to see you here. I have definitely been enjoying your videos, and yeah, it's been fun getting into Fusion. Cool. How's everyone feeling? How are we doing? Feeling good? What did people do to celebrate New Year's? Anything fun? You have any good New Year's resolution? My New Year's resolution is to try to be more present. I feel like my brain's been going everywhere a lot of my waking hours, and I want to be more present. So I've been doing some more mindfulness breath work, trying to keep physically active to help with all those things. But I want to make those things more of a habit. Anyone else have some good resolutions? A life-size human model would be good for setting the scale. Yeah, usually I would you know, if I knew I was making a VFX shot, I would, as a VFX supervisor, you would have someone there and they would be taking measurements, many measurements of lots of things, but those would help you set the scene scale. But this is the dirty way to do it. Okay, let's continue. We are going to go on to reconstruction, recreating the 3D objects in this environment. Let me turn off the info here. So we've already kind of added in this car, and I'm actually going to modify this 3D model. I don't want this to be a cop car. I want this to be just a regular car. We'll get to the cars in just a sec. For now, let's create this ground plane. This might be the easiest thing to reconstruct ever. There we go. And now let's start to position our cars in the right place so that they stick to the cars in this footage. So the way we're going to do that is with a few things. Now, since we did our camera layout and we set the rotation and position of our camera in a way that the 3D grid aligns with the ground in our footage, we can use this knowledge, and we know that our car should be somewhere on this ground plane. So that's our first clue in where to put this car in 3D space so that it's in the right spot in 3D space. So actually, before I do this, I'm going to cancel out the position on this car, and I'm actually going to, what is hidden here? I'm going to delete all the rigging stuff. Is this going to, it's fine. And then we're going to actually instance this collection that has the car inside of it to the scene, because we're going to duplicate this a few times. And so this will just be nice. It'll help us render a bit faster if we're instancing this geometry. And this seems like it's on the ground plane. That's looking good. And let's make sure that the this is set to 0, 0, 0, the instance. So we're good. Okay, we have this instance here, and we're going to start lining this up. So here's a trick I like to use. I like to just line up things visually first, and this might seem really wrong, but just hang in there. Just don't even worry about where this thing is in 3D space. Just go into the camera's point of view. And I actually, if you're following me on Instagram, I had a reel a few months ago about this tip. And so basically, yeah, just line this up visually. And now we're on frame 79. And so the car looks like it's in the right place on this frame. But odds are, if we move off this frame, all right, we got really lucky. This is pretty close. But you can see it is slipping just a little bit. Let's make this, I'm going to set this up so that this was a better example. I'm going to do a little prep work that pretend like you didn't see this. We'll do this. Okay, great. So now pretend like we lined up this car visually on frame 79 and we're excited. We're doing reconstruction and we got the car in the right place. But then odds are we go off this frame and it slips out of place. Okay, so what do? We could mess with the position and try to get this back. But here's a neat little trick. And actually first I'm just gonna try to get this a little bit better lined up. And also I should say we're not being super precise with matching our cars here today. I think for the final VFX shot, it actually works surprisingly well, given how roughly we're gonna position these. But of course, you could take all the time in the world to find the right car model that matches the real ones. But yeah, we're gonna do this a bit more simply today. So we got the car in the right place on frame 79. Now here's what we can do. we can select our camera, hit Shift S, cursor to active, and that's going to set the 3D cursor to the position of this camera on frame 79. And then we can set our pivot point to the 3D cursor. And then what we can do is we can move to a frame where the object is out of alignment. And then we can scale this object. And as we do this, what's happening is we are scaling this towards or away from the 3D cursor as it was positioned on frame 79. So what we can do is just scale this till this looks like it's in the right position. Something like that, right? And now look, basically that's set the position of this geometry. And now as we move throughout the shot, it's actually sticking pretty well. And we can continue to modify this a little bit. But yeah, and then we can kind of check this in our 3D view. And you can see from the side, it's a little bit higher off the ground. And this is actually, I'm seeing that we have some, oh, these empties are, okay, those are with the car. We could maybe do this, put it on the ground, and then scale it up a little bit. How are the tires looking? Let's see. Pretty good, pretty good. This looks a little bit ridiculous, but again, it's okay to cheat here and there. Okay, we got one car down. Let's duplicate this and we'll just move this back like this. Just checking the chat, making sure we're doing good. And we're seeing here, we're getting one frame where the camera's not moving at the start of the shot. Let's see what's going on there. It appears that start on frame 0. Huh. Why? I said start on frame 0. That doesn't make any sense. Well, Well, we're just gonna ignore the first frame. Sometimes you gotta cut your losses. So frame 0 is not making it into the final VFX shot. Just like that. Don't cross me. All right, let's line up this car. Again, we're just gonna do this visually. Scale this down a little bit. I'm looking at these wheels. Might have to rotate this into place, or maybe rotate this the other way. Scale it on the Z-axis. Not something you'd usually do. Okay. Little tweaks here and there. I'm just trying to get these wheels in the right place because I know from already having made this shot once that those wheels will show the highlights of the from the main VFX elements. So it's nice to have those lined up. Okay, so we have this lined up on frame 8. I'm going to select the camera and hit Shift S, cursor to active, so that we we line up the 3D cursor here on this frame. Then we'll go off this frame. We see our object is sliding. We just select this and scale it towards that 3D cursor to line this back up. And now that's in a better place. Okay, so we got those two cars doing good things. Let's get our ground plane extended here. Now we have one more car that I wanted to reconstruct. It's this one over here. We don't really need this one in the background because that's a bit far away for where our VFX elements will be. Let me actually just use this one. And again, since we did the camera layout and our coordinate grid is lined up intuitively with this street, I can just move these cars on the x-axis as a really good way to get them in a rough position. And I'll scale this up a little bit. We're using a sedan for an SUV, so maybe want to scale that way. Nice. All right, so again, this is lined up frame 68. I'll select the camera, hit Shift S, cursor to active. That puts the 3D cursor at the camera's location. Then we'll go to another frame. And this is already looking like it's in a pretty good spot. All right. And then, as always, we can come outside of our camera view. When we're doing reconstruction, it's good to check your scene and to make sure things are actually making sense in 3D, in the 3D world. For example, these two cars are parked right behind each other. And I see that this one is a bit further left. So I might come over here, select the camera, cursor to active, and I might just scale that. Well, that actually might just be where it was in reality. For the purposes of this stream, we're going to call that good enough. This is not as accurate as I had it for the final VFX shot, of course, when I could sit here for much longer and get these things lined up. How are we doing out there? Patrick, thanks for being here. We will catch you later. All right. How do I make it so it only renders in the camera's field of view? Do you mean the footage in the background? You have to clarify what you mean by that. I'm going to put these into a collection here. All right, so we got a reconstruction figured out. Our next step is going to be lighting and materials. And as I said earlier, actually, let me take a pause here. The people in corporate told me that I should tell you that I have a Blender VFX course. That's the workflow that we're going through today, is the workflow that I teach in depth throughout that course. Tomorrow, the course will be 50% off, but only for the first 100 people. So if you want the course, it's a great time to buy it. It's never going to be this discounted this much ever again, so don't miss out. If the course is something that you're interested in, click the link down below, enter your email, and I'll send you the details for the sale. This is the course website, and then when you access the course, this is kind of what it looks like. Here are the core lessons, which is basically 15 lessons where I take you through every step of the workflow in great detail. If you've seen my main channel videos, I love creating animations and just really explaining things as in the most clear, concise way that I can. And so I spent about a year and a half of work putting this course together. And so it's really exciting to have it fully finished, fully released. And I think people have been loving it. Been getting a lot of good feedback. And so we have the core lessons here, which will show you the fundamentals of this workflow. And then we also have some what I call vault projects. They're basically case study projects. These VFX shots that you can see here. Case study projects where I take you through step by step how to make the shots. I provide all the project files, all the assets, so that you can really understand how the fundamentals are applied on the ground level. And so currently there are 4 vault projects out, and these are the 4 VFX shots that you're seeing right now. Pretty soon I'm going to release another project, which is this includes this robot crawling over the laptop. And this is a really fun project to figure out how to composite in reflections and refractions through the glass. And so that will be released soon. And part of this course is getting these updates. And I'm releasing these projects so that no matter when you buy the course, you get kind of a growing library of fun projects to learn from and to try out for yourself. Yeah. Set the start frame to 1 instead of 0. Yeah, that would probably work. I think changing those settings is scary to me. So I think it's working right now. We'll just omit the first frame. Yeah, the sale is just tomorrow, just 10 a.m. Might have to set an alarm, but yeah, that is how it's gonna work. Yeah, okay. Let me try setting the start frame to 1. See, that shifts it. Frame offset. No. I'm gonna leave it. I think the frame offset was supposed to be at -1 because Blender starts image sequences from a file with a number 1. It's very confusing. It's one of the worst for me. It's one of the worst things in Blender is this frame offset setting. But basically, if your image sequence starts with a 1 or with a 0, you need the frame offset to be -1 because it's offset from frame 1. So if you want to start a frame of 0, you need to go -1. So, yeah. 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. If you go on my Instagram story, I put a clock on there. It's a countdown, so that you can see that. That might help. Okay, let's start recreating the lighting and materials of this scene. Okay, we'll start with these street lights. These are, like I said before, usually for a shot like this, I would want to have an HDRI, bring a 360 camera or a camera with a panorama head on set and capture an HDRI and create an HDRI that way. But I don't have one for this shot, and you're not always going to have one. So it's good to practice recreating the lighting from scratch, which is what we're going to do now. So to position and recreate this street light here, I have this tracking marker up here that's pretty close to that position. So I'm going to select it and move the 3D cursor to that location. And then let's add in a point light. And I'm just going to move this on the X-axis. I really wish this footage looked better. I feel like in this other scene that I was working in, the background footage was cooperating. Nope, This looks terrible here as well. Okay, we're gonna roll with it. If anyone from Blender is watching, I would love for the background footage to actually have tone mapping applied so that it looks nicer, but it's not super important. It's just aesthetic. Okay, so we have our light here. Let's set the radius to something like, I'd say this light is about 6 inches, so half a foot. That looks good. Let's check the position of this. That looks pretty good. Let's duplicate this and move this on the x-axis. Again, since we set our camera layout so that the x-axis is lined up with the street, we can use that to our advantage as we position some of these other things. So I'm moving this on the x-axis, getting this close, and then maybe I'll cheat this into place a little bit, and that seems like it's sticking there. And then I'll duplicate this again for these ones way in the distance. And our camera clipping needs to be extended. There we go. And these ones aren't going to be as important. And then I'll duplicate this. And we can also use our little trick of aligning this visually, setting that 3D cursor to this camera's position on this frame. And then we can move off this and scale this into place. And that looks pretty good. By the way, there's this really cool plugin that I've been using recently. I'll have to put a link to this in the description afterwards, or maybe someone can find this. It's called Stabilize Viewport. It's free, and basically it allows you to stabilize the viewport centered on a selected object, which is a really good way to kind of see if things are in the right position. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's kind of like the lock feature when you're doing motion tracking and you lock the tracking marker to the center of the viewport. Same exact idea, just here in the 3D viewport. So the color and the intensity. So I'm going to select all of them, and I'm going to hit Command L, and I'm going to link the object data, and that will make it so that if I change one light, the properties of one light, they all change together. And so now, yeah, we'll come back to setting the color and the power of the lights. First, I just want to select our ground plane, and let's create a new material. All right. How long have we been streaming for? I feel like I've just been, time has been flying by. This is fun. Okay, we got our ground plane. Basically, we're trying to recreate a concrete material here. And you could be very precise with this. You could find a pre-made material. In the course, I show you a method for capturing the color of different surfaces and then setting the base color more precisely using like a gray card or a color checker. But for this shot, we're just going to roughly eyeball this in. I'm going to increase the roughness on this a bit. Concrete is around there. Maybe. Let's see. Let's go into our rendered view. Great. Now, let's start bringing up the power of these lights. And the temperature. We want to make sure that in the background here, this is set to transparent so that we can see our footage back there. And we're just going to start to try and visually match our footage and this 3D scene. And we're going to do that by changing the color and power of these lights. We're going to do that by maybe adjusting the material on this ground plane. It's kind of a back and forth process of roughing things in, at least if we're doing it without a proper HDRI and a proper material reference. You kind of have to play a detective role in this process, and it's kind of fun to figure this out. So let's increase the strength of these even more. And I'm looking at these cars, and we can hit Control B to create a render region to kind of compare side by side our footage with the render. And I think our concrete material here could be a little bit brighter. Another thing we need to think about is ambient lighting. We have light not only coming from the street lights, but we have light that's coming from the entire environment. And that's, again, usually accomplished by creating an HDRI. For this scene, I found that it was good enough to just use a solid color in the world shader here. So I'm gonna make this kind of a warmer color since we have a lot of warm ambient light bouncing around the scene. And let's come back here. Also, for this ground plane, here in our original footage, the ground is a bit wet. So I'm gonna come back to this shader and I'm gonna decrease the roughness just a bit. So we get some of that sheen. Nice. And now we'll just increase the power here. Yeah. This is definitely tricky without proper reference, but I think we're getting there. The thing is, if we're looking at this ground plane here and we're trying to match this visually with the footage, let me actually turn off the tracking markers. You might say, okay, this is too dark right now. And there's two ways that we could change that, right? We could change the brightness of this material, or we could change the brightness of the light that's illuminating this surface. And so that's kind of the back and forth that you need to go through. Now, usually you want to set your materials first because material properties are constant. They don't change based on the lighting of your scene. A proper concrete material should work in any scene. So that's why usually I'll set, a value here roughly in line with what I think concrete should be at. And then after that's set, I will try to not touch the material properties as much and instead change the lighting, the color and strength of the lights, because that's going to, that is more variable than the material properties. That's a good question. Why don't I project the footage onto this floor plane and use it as a material? I tried that for this shot and it didn't work super well. But that is a great technique that is always worth giving a shot. But I found that just having a plain ground plane without that detail was sufficient. But definitely, again, when you're making this for yourself, go crazy. Get that detail, get it matched. And this is looking pretty good. Yeah. Let me make sure these lights are all synced, and they are. I want to reference the final scene that I actually created here. And okay, our lights were set at 2000. And our material, I'm just gonna cheat here a little bit, since you know, my former self spent a lot more time figuring out these values. Okay, we're gonna call that good for now. I want to now modify the material on these cars, because we don't want all this detail that we got from this pre-made model that we downloaded from BlenderKit. We want these to just kind of be a blank slate. We're just putting these cars in place mainly to catch the lighting from our main VFX element once we add it into this shot. So I'm gonna go back to the main car model here. And for the car paint, we will just take out the image texture, and let's see if that did it. Nice. It looks good. We'll just delete this license plate, and then my viewport is quite laggy right now. We want to turn off this light. Could Compify have worked? Compify is great. I definitely say if you know that workflow, it's always fun to just try it out and see if it works for a shot. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Well, actually, I feel like there's been some updates to Compify that I have not had the chance to try, and I'm excited to get back into that, but I've been focusing on the course and finishing that up. So maybe the newer versions of Compify work even better. I mean, I'm sure they do. But again, I just coming from a perspective of creating the course, I love to teach kind of the most basic fundamental way to do things. And then if you want to innovate on that, automate different parts of this workflow, go ahead. But it's the easiest way to do that is when you understand the fundamentals really well. And so that's why you'll see me doing a lot of these things very manually. And it seems a bit silly, but hopefully this helps in your learning process. Okay, so we got the car material switched up. It's black, which will be good to catch the reflection of our main VFX elements. Great. Let's go ahead and call this finished in terms of recreating the lighting and the materials. Yeah, this will be this will remain on this live stream will remain on the channel after it ends. So if it's super late, super early, thanks for being here, and get some sleep, and it'll the live stream will be waiting for you. You can replay this. I know that maybe I'm going too fast or maybe I'm going super slow, but yeah, you can replay this and watch it back. Okay, let's keep going here. We're gonna add in some VFX elements. So at this point, we've pretty much recreated our real world in 3D. We recreated the camera movement. We placed that camera in 3D space. We recreated the objects in the environment, the ground plane and the cars. And then we set the lighting and materials in that environment. So now this Blender scene that we have is pretty much a perfect, or ideally it's a perfect recreation of the original scene that we filmed. And they should look visually very similar. Let me actually save this Blender file before I forget to do that. And hydrate. Stay hydrated out there. How do you guys like to stay hydrated? Water? Or are you drinking sparkling water? I think it's crazy people that drink sparkling water as their main source of hydration. Don't get me wrong. I love sparkling water, but it's not good for your teeth. It's not cheap, depending on which one you're getting. Gotta drink the pure H2O. Okay. Let's put in some VFX elements. If you go back to the page that I've linked below, you'll see I've linked this model of this kind of cool sci-fi container made by this person. Thank you very much for putting this on BlenderKit. It's a very cool model. And then also, well, yeah, we'll start with this. Copy the search term, come back to Blender, and let's put this into the scene. By the way, if you're I never mentioned this, but the dimensions of this footage are 4:3, and you might find that a bit weird. But that's basically because I just was testing out the 4:3 mode on my camera. And I figured for posting this on social media, it's kind of a nice resolution to work in. But yeah, nothing's being warped here. This is just the aspect ratio that we're working in today. Anyway, we should have that generator model now that we clicked copy search term. It should be up here. And I'll drag that into our scene. And then let's position this. Now, this is a lot smaller than I had it in the final scene. And I just, this is a sci-fi object. This could be whatever scale we want it to, as long as the details look like they could be semi-realistically at the scale that we're working in. I thought that this worked at this scale. But obviously for other objects, they're going to be more confined to a specific scale. But I'll place this roughly around there. And maybe a bit further back. Let's actually scale this up. We want a real sense of power. The ground looks like it's floating to you. I think this is looking pretty decent right here, right? I mean, this grid seems like it's sticking decently. Maybe the ground plane is off? Sometimes I accidentally move things out of place. No, the ground plane's in the right place. But yeah, definitely good to keep that in mind. Okay, we got this in here. That's looking sick. The other thing that I added was kind of a support underneath this because I wanted this lifted off the ground and rotating. So let's actually animate that real quick. That's just going to be some Z rotation. And we'll do this. Keyframe that. Set this to linear. Let's open up our graph editor. And we'll add a modifier so that these keyframes continue after this, so that they cycle, and that will allow us to easily control the speed of this rotation. See, that's too fast, so I can just drag out this second keyframe, and that makes this curve a bit more reasonable. Something like that. Looks pretty cool. And then let's figure out the support on the base there. So we'll come into this page that's linked below the stream, go to the base support. And I kind of kit bashed from this. I took this base here. So copy the search term. Come back to Blender. Drag this in. And we will basically what I did, I just kept this base, and let's delete everything else. Oh, I actually also kept these cables because I thought they were kind of cool. What the heck? Oh, I see. We don't want to delete this empty. There we go. Okay. And then I just scaled this up, restricting this to the X and Y axis so we have a nice flat base like that. And let's snap this to this location. Snap selection to cursor. Let's make sure this is on the ground plane. And it looks like the origin of this object. Oh, you know what? I should have done that for this. Snap selection to cursor. Nice. And now this is not on the ground plane. So we'll just make sure this Z coordinate is set to 0. All right. And then let's rotate this so that these cables kind of go off to the right. We'll select both of them, and let's rotate around the 3D cursor, or actually I wanted to rotate this part. There we go. That's clipping through there a little bit, but I think that'll be mostly in the shadows. So we should be fine there. This is going to be available to watch later, yes. Okay, yeah. Ground plane should be all right. Okay, so we have these elements in here. And let's, yeah, I think this is good. Let's kind of see how this is looking. Nice. I like the speed of that rotation. I like where this is lined up. Let's kind of check out the rendered view here. I'm going to now start to modify the materials here on this generator. I first want this strength to be a bit higher. And I'm going to expand the hello, welcome to the stream. I'm going to expand the ground plane so that we're catching all of the shadows and all that good information being cast upon it. Let's make sure that these cables are actually resting on the ground. And is this actually on the ground? Let's see. Oh, I see. So this, oh, I see. Our empty that we set Z equals 0 is not actually at the right location for this model. So we'll move this down visually here. Now my laptop, as we're going into, I'm working on a laptop right now. As we're going into rendered view, starting to chug, starting to hear some fans. So hopefully stream stays healthy. Can you animate the camera angle in Blender? Sponsored by Toyota. Toyotathon is on. It's Christmas. I don't know what you mean by can you animate the camera in Blender? Like outside of the camera view, like Ian Hubert style? Yes, you can. It's just a different workflow. Is 1 pixel, you mean 1 pixel error on the camera tracking? Is that what you mean? Is that a low enough error? That should be, I mean, Ideally, you want it a little bit lower than 1, but yeah, I'm doing all this on an M1. It's been treating me well for a few years. Yeah, you can. I'm not sure I'm exactly understanding the camera animation, but yeah, that is a workflow if you want to change up the camera angle. There are ways to do that. Okay, let's continue here. This is looking good. I think we should begin setting up some rendering and compositing. How does that sound? Let's do that. So in my compositing workspace, by the way, I'm using Blender 5.0 for this project. There's a lot of great updates to the compositor. Highly recommend using it. For one thing, we have this really nice asset shelf with some cool effects that are in it. You'll see I have some extra effects that you probably aren't seeing because I've downloaded some packs. But yeah, Blender 5.0 is awesome. Let's just start fresh here. Let's delete all these things that we had set up for us. And let's open up another window. I don't like to use the backdrop in the compositor because I don't like to deal with seeing the nodes and the backdrop together. So we'll open up a new window, go to the image editor, go to the viewer node. And now this will show us whatever is visible or linked up to the viewer over here. So that's kind of how I like to set things up. First, let's add in a movie clip. This will be our footage. There we go. It's looking nice. And then let's add in a render layers node. And for starters, this will be the main render layer we have. So to start out, how do we approach rendering out this scene? In our full rendered view, we see a lot of things that we don't want to see in our final composite. We see, basically, we want to extract this CG object, this power generator. We want to see that. We want to see the light on the cars, but we don't want to see the rest of the cars. So we want to extract just the light information coming from the generator. And I'll show you how to do that. And then we want to capture the light and the shadows that are falling on the pavement without actually seeing the ground plane. And so I'll show you how to do that as well. But for starters, let's start with the easiest thing. And that's just going to be to render out our main VFX elements on their own. So I have a bunch of collections over here. This is really important when you're working and especially when you're rendering. To have things organized. This is going to allow us to access certain settings to change the visibility of how these objects and these collections are appearing in our render layer. We have collections. This is a render layer, which is basically, you can think of a render layer as as one grouping of settings in terms of like collection visibility settings. A render layer also has specific render passes that you can assign to it. Every render layer has the same objects and the same collections, but you can set them to have different properties in different render layers. So we're just going to start with one render layer for now. It's going to be called main. And we're going to come to this filter and open up or enable the holdout and indirect only toggles, and that's going to allow us to set our collections to these different visibility settings. So if I select the cars collection and I set it to indirect only, now we don't see the cars directly, but we see the lighting and the shadows that they're contributing to the scene. We want to do the same thing for the ground plane, which is here, and I'll put this in its own collection. Ground. We'll set this to indirect. That's looking good. And there we go. We have if I turn off our overlays, you can see we have just our main VFX elements, this power generator on its own. and that's good for this render layer. Yes, so next, you guessed it, the cobbler guessed it, we're gonna be, we wanna catch the shadows in the scene, so let's create a new render layer. And we'll call this extras, because this is gonna be shadows and some other light information. And in this render layer, we want to select our ground plane, and we're gonna turn it into a shadow catcher by going to the object properties, and in the visibility, enable shadow catcher. And then for the, you'll see that the ground plane disappears. Don't worry, the data will still be there. For the shadow catcher to work properly, you need to go to the render passes and enable the shadow catcher render pass right there. So those two settings go hand in hand. And then what else do we want? So that catches our shadows of our power generator. Another thing we want is to not see this generator directly. So we want to set this collection to indirect only. We don't want to see this Toyota Camry. I gotta say the full name because you know I'm sponsored. And we are, we want to put this inside of that collection, make sure this is set to indirect only. Actually, let's just move all these things into here. Did that work? There we go. And then we'll delete this hierarchy. And okay. So that's set to indirect only, so that we don't see that in this render layer. We're getting the shadows. And now we want to capture we said we want to capture only the blue light on these cars. We don't want to capture this orange light coming from these street lights or any of the ambient light coming from our world shader, because that is light information that already existed in the original scene. So we're using these cars to only as a sort of shadow catcher in their own right, or you could think of them as like a reflection catcher. We're using them to only catch the light that is being added to this scene by our VFX elements. So to do that, to extract just that blue light source, we are going to use something called light groups. And basically that's a special render pass that lets you customize where different light information in your scene is stored. So let me just show you to make that a little bit more clear. In my render passes tab, down here, I can go to passes, and then you'll see we have light groups. I'm trying to make sure this is not behind my head here. Oh, gotta go higher. There we go. Let's add a light group. Let's call it blue. And this will, because this will store the blue light information. And then we need to select our sci-fi container object, because that's what's emitting that light. And in the object properties, we need to go down, and in the shading section, we need to assign this object to that blue light group that we created. And so you'll see what this is going to do. It's going to do some good things for us. Okay, I'm thinking through this. What else do we need? What is this? A simple hinge. Interesting. All right, hopefully we didn't need those things. Yep, just gonna extract that blue light source. By the way, I have a Blender VFX course. This workflow that I'm showing you here today is a workflow that I dive into in great detail, in complete detail in that course. I highly recommend it. as the creator of said course. I've been working on it for like a year and a half, pouring all my time into it. It's been my full-time job, and I'm very proud of it. I think, yeah, of course, I'm going to say it's incredible. But the course will be 50% off tomorrow, but only for the first 100 people. So if you're interested in the course, it's a great time to buy it, of course. Click the second link in the description, enter in your email. I'll send you the details for the sale. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you try it out and you find that it's not the right fit, no worries. I'll give you a refund. But yeah, I think you're gonna find that you'll learn a lot of really cool stuff, and you'll get the fundamental understanding of this workflow that allows you to innovate, automate, allows you to implement your own take on these different steps. Yeah, that was my goal with this course, was to really drill down to the fundamentals, to give you a really good understanding of the most important concepts that you need to know. So does anyone have any questions about the course? Let me just open it up for questions real quick. I don't want to make this all about the course, but I got to plug the course. What is the difference between light linking and light groups? That's a great question. Light linking, I haven't used, but my understanding is that, let's say you want one light only to illuminate a certain object in your scene, and not any other objects. Then you could link those together. And then light groups, again, is just a way to put the light into different collections, into different groups, so that you can extract that information. And we usually do that, as you'll see, to have more control over the lighting in compositing. So that after because obviously rendering is very expensive. So as compositors, as VFX artists, we like to give ourselves as much control in compositing as possible, so that we don't have to re-render the scene if we don't have to. Cool. Well, again, if you have any questions about the course, let me know. I'm going to continue working. We're actually almost done with the render setup. Let's see what we have here. Oh, this is the wrong file. That's the finished file. Let's actually also move our ground plane here. All right, and now we don't want to see these cars. Well, no, we do want to see the cars directly in the shot. We don't want them to cast shadows. So what I can do in this viewport in rendered view is I can click on this drop down, and I can change this to the shadow catcher. And now you'll see, remember when we turned the ground plane into a shadow catcher, and oh, sorry, am I on? Okay, sorry, wasn't showing the screen. Let me redo that real quick. We're back here in the extras render layer in rendered view. If you go to this drop down, you can change from the combined pass to the any other pass that we want to see. So in this case, we can look at the shadow catcher pass. And again, this was created by selecting that ground plane, turning it into a shadow catcher, and then enabling the shadow catcher pass here in the light pass category of. So again, these render passes are specific to this render layer. So you'll see in the extras render layer, we've enabled the shadow catcher pass. But if we go back to our main render layer, where the main VFX elements live, we don't have that shadow catcher pass enabled. So these render passes belong and are associated with the render layers. Render passes, render layers. That terminology confused the heck out of me starting out. So I try to be really clear about that, teaching people. So we got the shadow catcher pass. Again, we can see what that looks like, going back to my original point. And we see that the cars are casting shadows. And again, we don't want to capture that information. You want to think about what was the original, what light information have we already captured in the original footage? And we already captured the shadows being cast by the cars in the original footage. So we don't want to recast those shadows, and we don't want to double up those shadows in this composite. And so to prevent from doing that, we're going to select our car elements. We'll go into the object properties, and we're just going to turn off the I'm battling myself here. Let's see. We want to disable. I put a little piece of paper on the screen so that I don't put the viewport. Okay, you're just gonna tick off shadow. There we go. Nice. And now you'll see that the car no longer casts a shadow. And let me do that for the rest here. All right, so now our shadow catcher is just catching the shadows from those main VFX elements. That's perfect. What else do we want to do? I think that's pretty good. If we go back to our combined pass, which is the combined pass is this main render view that you're used to seeing when you're in rendered view in Blender. It's just another render pass. We have all these different render passes here, and the combined pass is just the default one of all the light information combined together. So even though you might not know it, you've been using render passes all along, which is pretty neat. I'm seeing that on the ground here, we have this hole where some light is coming through, and I don't want that. So I'm gonna isolate this object, and I think, yeah, we need to fill in the bottom part of this. So let's just select that, and we'll hit F to fill that, and then let's make sure this is not, okay, that's kind of a crazy material, so I'll just select this, and let's assign a different material, something like carbon fiber. Oh, we don't want to do that. What? Okay. There we go. Let's add a material. That's what we need to do. And then we need to assign that. Okay, we need just a plain, you know what? Let's just use the ground material, which we didn't name. And so it's probably just called material. We'll assign that. All right, hopefully we didn't screw anything up. Now we should be in a better spot. I love when the shortcut doubles up like that. Or not even, yeah. We got the shadows. We got all the render layers set up. Yeah, well, I'll show you the workflow today is I'm going to do the compositing in Blender, and then I'm going to export an EXR sequence, and we'll bring that into DaVinci Resolve. So hopefully that shows you some of that workflow. We're not going to. I like to also composite in Resolve in Fusion. I think it's great. But today we're going to use Blender to show you how capable Blender is, and also to show you that at the core of this workflow, the fundamental compositing concepts that you need to know are really, they transcend any one compositing program. And it's easy to get hung up on what compositor should I use, but hopefully, and there's definitely, you know, things in Nuke, in Fusion that make compositing way easier than using Blender. And those are very good reasons to use those programs. But hopefully I can show you that it's not always the tool's fault. If you're feeling hopefully I can show you that Blender is quite capable in the compositing area. I'm just going to raise this up a little bit so that it's not resting on our platform as much. I could have just done that the easy way. Okay, nothing's clipping, that looks good. Now usually as I set up the render settings, I would be compositing at the same time. So I would set up a render layer, composite a little bit, and I'd go back and forth. And you'll see that we're gonna do that because we're gonna tweak this scene and the lighting a little bit maybe as we start to see how things come together in the compositor. But since I already made this scene, I knew how all this was gonna come together. So yeah. Do I do a DaVinci Resolve workflow in the course? Yeah, so in the specific case study projects, I do go through, there are, let's see, currently there's one project where the compositing is done in Blender. And then throughout the workflow, also like I showed earlier today, when we're preparing the footage, we're using DaVinci Resolve. Yeah, Resolve comes into it kind of in the beginning, and then sometimes in the end, if we're compositing, and then also for color grading is in Resolve as well. And I show those all in the course. So good question. Okay, let's render this out and see what we're dealing with here. I should have done that before I started answering questions, and I think, let's see if we have these settings set up correctly. Now you'll see what's happening here initially is we're synchronizing these objects, and this is taking a while. And so I'm actually gonna stop this render before it even starts by hitting escape. And one thing that I've found really helps to prevent that synchronization step is to, let me remember to save this, that kind of freaked me out there. To help prevent render from synchronizing the objects, we want to go to our original car, because I think the car was the car was the culprit of that lag, and we're just going to apply the different modifiers that are being used on the car. So I'm going to select all of these things, and I'm going to go to Object, Convert to Mesh, and hopefully that didn't screw anything up too badly. And I think that's good. Yeah, great. So that applied all the modifiers to all of these objects. And now when we render this out, it shouldn't have to synchronize the objects for as long. Another thing we can do to help is in the render settings, we can, let's see, we can use persistent data. We can also simplify the scene so that our max subdivisions are something like 2. And when we set that, we can kind of look at our objects to make sure that we're not losing too much detail. But I think there's no modifiers applied to this main generator, so I don't think we're running into anything with that. For the texture limit, let's do this for the heck of it. Okay, let's render this out and see where we're at. Let's play some music for a little bit. We gotta wake back up. All right, we're rendering. It's good times. You guys want to see something cool? Check this out. Check this. I mean, this might crash everything, but it's worth it. On on the stream, I have this scene set up. Basically, I put, if you ever used OBS for live streaming or anything, you put the source behind, and I've got the green screen going back there, and yeah, it's kind of trippy, kind of fun. Not something you can look at all day though. Definitely not something you wanna look at forever. Okay. We got our render. It's done. We can, in our render window, we can look at what we've got. By the way, we've enabled denoising in this render to make sure that, because let me turn off the music. I know it's distracting. Okay. We've got the denoising going. Yeah, Cobbler, I'm sorry about that. I hope I didn't burn out your retinas. So we got denoising on this. We got the main render layer, the extras here, and we can also see the different render passes that we enabled. We got the shadow catcher. We got the noisy render. So the combined render pass, if you have denoising enabled, is going to be denoised. And then this noisy image is basically the combined pass without denoising. Yeah, it's a noisy image. I guess it's self-explanatory. And then here we have our blue light group. So this is that light information just from the main VFX element, which is pretty sweet. That's going to be really good for us. So let's go into the compositor. Let's start doing some compositing finally. We have a render layers node. First things first, let's make sure that we undistort this footage. Now that is not what we want. Movie distortion is the node. And we're going to set this to the movie clip that we used for motion tracking. It's the only clip that we have in this project. By the way, if I didn't mention this, you can follow along with this project. The footage is available down below. You can download that, check that out. And yeah, recreate this project, watch the live stream again, and have fun. This is just, I think going through this workflow is just a lot of fun. Say what you want about other ways to create this type of work, but we got the lens distortion removed with this node. And now let's we'll start with the shadows, and we want to multiply those into our scene. That's how we use the shadow catcher. You'll see this is a mostly white image. If I right click, I can see the pixel values down here. I can't really show you with my mouse. Well, I can if I go like this. You can see these RGB values and see for most of this image, it has a value of 1. Now it's kind of curious that this is not exactly 1. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's denoising. It's probably denoising. But the way we use this shadow catcher render pass is we multiply it on top of our footage. So we create a mixed color node and we set this to multiply, take the shadow catcher, set the factor to 1, and we get that doing that. And yeah, we're gonna work with that for now. We'll come back and modify that in a bit. Next, let's duplicate this render layers node and let's put our main VFX elements on top. Actually, first, let's add the light on top of our cars. So we'll duplicate this. This mixed color node, we'll set this to add, because whenever you're adding light into your scene, think about using the add blend mode. If you've ever worked in Photoshop or After Effects or Blender, you've probably heard of blending modes, and those are just these different operations that we have here. So we're going to set this to add. We're going to add this into the scene. Now this is pretty noisy, and if you want to, I'll show you how to denoise this specific render pass in just a little bit, but we've got that being added in, and that's good for now. Now let's put our main VFX elements on top of this. So we'll use an alpha over node. Excuse me. There we go. Alpha over, put this on top of the background, and we get that. And then at the end here, we are going to take our full composite and we're going to redistort this like that. Now you'll see we have these edges showing, and usually to fix this you'd want to do something called overscan, which is basically rendering a wider version of your scene that has a few extra pixels on the edge, so that when you redistort the CG elements, you're not missing that data on the edge. But we're not going to do that today. That's a bit more involved. It's something I teach in the course. For now, and sometimes when I'm feeling lazy, I just add a transform node, scale this up a little bit. Now that's just going to increase the overall canvas size, but to see that reflected more accurately, let's duplicate this alpha over node. This is just a little trick. We just want to crop this composite back down to the original resolution. So we'll put our final composite over the original footage, and you'll see that takes us from this, and that just crops those edges. The background footage is not really doing anything in this case since we're covering it up completely, but now I can just lower this scale factor till we're cropping out as little as possible. Okay. Nice. Okay, so this is the point where we start to analyze what we have here. We have a good rough composite setup, and now yeah, let's kind of start to figure out what we need to improve here. So in our color management settings, one thing that we're noticing, if I increase the exposure here, let me make sure you can see this. It is kind of hidden by my head. There we go. One thing that's easy to kind of screw up in a VFX composite are the black levels. You can see as I increase the exposure on this viewer, we have these pretty dark areas of our VFX elements, but the footage doesn't really have any areas that are quite as dark as that. So that's going to be one thing we want to improve, is making sure that we lift the black levels a bit so that they're matching the footage better. Another thing we want to do is probably denoise the light on the cars and this light group that we created, and that's very easy. Another thing I'm seeing is that this is pretty bright down here, which is not bad. I think that actually kind of works. I don't think my final VFX shot had the light that bright, but I kind of like this. But one thing we're seeing is this noise. It's kind of, yeah, this noise down here on the ground. And that's basically an issue with our footage just being a bit too noisy. And someone mentioned earlier, denoising your footage is a great idea. You can do that in DaVinci Resolve when you're preparing the footage. But yeah, I didn't do that. So here's a way to work around that. One thing that I found out from working on this previously, you can see that noise is here in the original footage. So one thing that I did is, let's see if I remember this. Oh, I added a mix color node. We'll put this here onto our background footage. And let me get this out of the way so we have some more space. And we essentially want to correct the color of this ground here. And I can do that with this node, make sure the factor's set up to 1, change the mode to color. And then I'm just going to select this eyedropper, and I'm going to drag the eyedropper around, and that's going to sample the average color of the area that I drag the eyedropper on. And let's view this node. And by the way, to view a node in the compositor, hold Command Shift and click on that node, and that will link up the viewer to that point of the graph. And so you'll see what this does is it shifts our footage so that the color of our pixels has the same hue as the color that we've chosen here. Now we don't want to apply this to the entire shot, but this works pretty well since the color of this ground is fairly uniform. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the mask mode. We'll create a new mask, call this ground, and then let's draw out a rough mask. Actually, we can just close this off. And then we want to feather this out, so we'll hit Option S to scale the feathering here. And we'll scale this down a little bit. Yeah, let's now bring this into our composite by adding a mask node. We'll choose the ground mask that we just created, and we can view this, and we'll plug this into the factor input. And so now if we toggle this node on and off by hitting M, you can see we're just affecting that area underneath or wherever that mask is showing. And so I can scale that feather down a little bit. And I actually kind of want to cover this area over here. Maybe I'll, yeah, get the full ground in here. Scale this. Okay. So now we turn this on and off. We see a bit of a difference there, but we're going to see it most when we come to the final composite. By the way, our exposure is still increased here, so we'll turn that back down. And another neat shortcut you can use in Blender now is if you have a viewer selected, you can hit a number, or wait, how does this work? Oh, hold Control and then hit a number, and that will assign it to that viewer at that point in the tree. So that allows me to like view this point of the tree, and then if I want to get back to this viewer, this is now viewer number 1. I can press 1 on my keyboard, and we get back to that. Okay, so that's cool. And now we see, turn this on and off. That's really helping to clean up that area. And this is shifting the color of this area a little bit. So what I'll do is I can change this color, but another thing that might be a better thing to modify is actually just the color of the shadow catcher. So if you need to modify your shadow catcher pass, the main adjustment that is going to be the safest is going to be a gamma adjustment. Basically, gamma adjusts the midtones of an image. So anything that is pure white has a value of 1, stays the same, it cannot be changed by gamma. Anything that's pure black has a value of 0, cannot be changed. And so with our shadow catcher, we don't want to change this white area, because you'll see, let's add a color balance node. And you'll see if I change the gain, which is just an exposure adjustment, that's going to affect our entire image. And so that's why we like to change the gamma, which is just going to affect the midtones. And you can see we get the adjustment that we want. Sorry guys, it's this has been, how long has the stream been going for? Time has been flying by. 2 hours. Wow. I have respect for the people that do this on the regular. This is a marathon, but this is fun. I am glad that you all are here and watching along. Hopefully hopefully at some point, if you're not following along right now, I'd love to, yeah, hear that you went back and tried to recreate this shot yourself. And if you do, definitely send me what you create. I'd love to see it. So we got those shadows coming in like that. Let's look at the full composite. Nice. Let's turn this off, turn this on again. Those adjustments are helping quite a bit. Let's see. I'm just trying to, I think, okay, we'll keep the gamma at 1. I do think this is a little bit bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the brightness of our emission shader here. I want to see what I had this for the actual final scene. 20. Okay. Yeah, it's a little bit more reasonable. Let's take this down to like 30 because I do like the increased brightness. Let's cut it in half, 35. And then while we're at it, while we're getting ready for another render, another thing we wanted to do was denoise the light group render paths on these cars. And to do that, we'll come back to this extras render layer and let's go to the render passes and we'll enable the denoising data pass. And you'll see how we'll use that in just a sec. Was there anything else that we wanted to do while we're here? I think that'll be pretty good. The lighting on our main element is looking decent. Yeah, let's give this another render. Keep going. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to run to the bathroom quickly. I don't have one of those fancy be right back things to put on the screen right now, but if anyone's asked, I'll be right back. Okay, we're back on sound. Sound is back. Our render is finished. If you're curious why we're seeing black here, it's because whatever we see in this rendered view by default is going to be whatever's hooked up to this group output node. So we just need to make sure that not only is this connected to the viewer, but it's also connected to the group output. And that'll do that for us. Okay. First things first, we have the light on the ground still pretty strong. One thing we could do, let's see. Well, okay, we'll come back to that. I want to denoise the blue lights on the side here. So let's add we rendered out this denoising data, which is represented here on this render layers node. So let's add a denoise node. We'll hook up the light group render pass. That's the blue light. And then we'll connect up the albedo denoising data and the normal. And so that is going to denoise that for us. And we'll swap this out on our add node, and we'll hit 1 to view the end of the composite. And there we go. That's denoised. Of course, when we render out the final sorry, I just read the chair comment. What I was going to say is when we render out the final scene, we will increase the render settings, and the denoising won't be as necessary. This chair is a nice chair. I found it at an estate sale, and it has this funky, like, it like hugs you, and your spine goes right there. It's interesting. I like it. Yeah. Looks like the alien. It does, like, especially this part. I've never thought about that. And now I'm only going to be thinking that I'm being controlled when I sit in this chair. Okay, another thing I wanted to do, one kind of interesting way, because we talked about the black levels being off. The black levels, typically the black levels in your footage are usually more lifted than the black levels in your VFX. It's usually the case that you need to raise the levels of your VFX to match the footage. But one interesting way to achieve this is to grade the footage before you composite anything into it. And then you composite it, and you grade it in a way that it brings the black levels down. So looking at my original footage, I can actually hit N to bring up this side panel, go to the scopes. And if we look at this waveform, you'll see that our black levels are not quite at the bottom, meaning that the black areas are just a bit lifted. And if I turn down the exposure, you can see that that crushes those black levels a little bit. So one thing we can do is we can grade this footage to get those black levels sitting more at 0, and then we can composite in our VFX elements, and then we can reverse grade the footage and the whole composite together to remove whatever adjustment we made before, so that the footage itself has visually no change, but it helps make our VFX elements sit into the shot better. So let me show you exactly what I mean, in case that's not very clear. What I'm going to do is to bring the black levels down on the footage. I am going to use a gamma adjustment. And that's because gamma is an operation that I can reverse easily. So I'll add this gamma operation here. You can see if I increase this, we are darkening and I look at my scopes, we're pushing down, and we're also just adding gamma in general. As I said before, it changes the midtones of your image, and it will increase contrast if you increase the gamma. And so we're dealing with a very low contrast scene due to the fog and due to the exposure in the camera. So I'm going to increase the gamma, increase the contrast, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a value node here. We'll set this to 1.3 because that's the value that we have going into here. And I'm going to add another math node because, so here, yeah, here's what's happening. We have our footage, and then we have the shadow catcher that's multiplied on top. We add in the light information of those cars on the side. I'm going to set this to fast so that the denoising is a bit faster. And then we have the VFX elements put on top of that. And so now you see that with this gamma adjustment, things are sitting a lot better. But if you're working for yourself and this is your own project, then great. You could keep that gamma cranked up. You could keep the contrast in your shot. You could call it a day. I personally think it's a little bit too much contrast. But if you're working at a big studio, you never want to change. The general philosophy is to not touch the original footage, the original plate, as much as possible. You want to keep the footage in its original state without changing contrast or exposure, and you want to form the visual effects elements to match the footage. So with that mentality, I want to reverse this gamma adjustment after we've composited these things into the shot. So to do that, the calculation that I need to make is just to go 1. We're going to set this math node to divide, and we're going to divide 1 by the gamma value. And we'll duplicate this, put this here, and hook that up. So now if we view this, let's turn off all our VFX elements. Now if we select both of these gamma adjustments and we turn them off and then we turn them on again, you'll see there's no change. This first one adds contrast, and then this second one takes it right out of our image again. But when we have the VFX elements in there, this really helps. This really helps match our black levels. Let me show you if I turn them off, the gamma adjustments off, and then on again, you'll see it looks like we're essentially just modifying those VFX elements. Yeah, so that's working pretty well. Now I'm noticing that the light on the ground here is a bit green. It's not quite matching the hue of the light that's actually being emitted. So I'm going to go back to our gamma adjustment. And sorry, I'm just trying to keep up on your comments. I'm going to go back to the gamma adjustment, and let's modify the hue here a little bit. Let's increase the saturation just so we can see this more clearly. Wow. Okay, nice. I feel like it needs to be slightly. Little tweaks here and there. Let's maybe, okay, maybe wow. I think we might need to adjust the lift a little bit too. Oh, it might have just been a saturation thing. Okay. It looks pretty close. Let me get in. Let me really get in here and get detailed with this. Now, another thing that will affect this shadow catcher and how it appears when we composite it into the footage is going to be the color of the actual ground material that we assigned to this ground plane. That is what Blender is using to calculate what this shadow catcher should look like. So that's another thing you could try to modify. In fact, I'm wondering if we shift, let's come back. Okay, let's come back to our full 3D scene. I'm wondering if our light sources, our street lights, they might have the wrong color, which would then illuminate our ground plane a certain way and it would change the shadow catcher color. So let's come back to our main render layer. And I'm going to disable the shadow catcher on our ground plane just for now. And we'll also make it visible. And let's actually also, let's hide this. And I just want to really check the hue of these lights. One thing you can do is you can go to the world shader. This is kind of a hacky way to check that you're recreating the lighting accurately, but you can add in a color input node, and we can use this eye catcher or eyedropper and select the color of our render. Then we can duplicate this, and if you hit E, that will bring up the shortcut for the eyedropper, and we can kind of sample the color of our footage, and then we can look at the hue, and we see that's 0.08 in the footage, and this is like 0.07, so it's pretty close. But what we could do, for example, is we could now come into our light properties, and we could change the hue of this. And I think we're going in the wrong direction. And of course, we need to sample the same area to really get an accurate read on this. That looks too orange. These are the little changes that can really be helpful. Let's see, what direction do I want to go here? Okay, that was the right direction, just too much. All right, I think we were actually pretty much there. Splitting hairs at this point, 0.08. Look at that. Nice. Okay, I don't think we really did anything there, but that just goes to say that if you're experiencing difficulties in your composite, it's often good to go back to the original scene and really make sure that you've dialed in the lighting and the materials to recreate your real-world environment as accurately as possible, and start to fix the issues that way, and that will often clear up issues that you have in the composite. What software am I using? I am using Blender. For those that don't know, this is Blender. This is a 3D program. It's free. It's super fun. And if you like movies with special effects, this is a program that is an industry standard in on a lot of productions to make those movies. And so I'm glad that you're here checking this out. If this interests you, I have a lot of other tutorials about making work like this. By the way, if you're just tuning in, the thing that we're making in this live stream is this VFX shot. We're trying to get back to this. And so that's what we're working on. All right. So let's see. Where do we leave off in the composite? We got this. This is looking pretty good. One other thing I want to add here. I don't think well, this is looking decent. Yeah. We need to add some noise to our main VFX elements so that it matches the footage. You'll see this footage has a lot of this speckled graininess in it, and we need that, we want to match that in our main VFX elements. So let's add that in. That's actually a new thing that we have in Blender 5.0, is we have a cool noise effect. So let's look for noise. And I'm just turning up my viewport exposure to be able to see this more easily. We'll crank this up. Let's see how this looks. And now this is definitely not the best effect for recreating noise accurately. It's pretty simple, but it can do the trick for us here today. There's a lot more advanced tools in different compositing programs that would be more suitable for a professional workflow. But this is kind of the general idea I'm trying to get across, is just what these different steps are. So yeah, we got some noise there. It looks pretty good. Again, if you were using a more advanced tool, you could change the size of the noise, the density, and lots of other properties. But hey, I'm not going to complain. This is a really welcomed addition to Blender 5.0. Another thing I want to add in this composite is a bit of glow. We got a lot of fog in the scene, and so our light source should be creating a lot of misty glow in our scene. So let's add that. It's really fun. Let's see. I want to add a glare node. This node also has a lot of new updates for Blender 5.0. Super awesome updates. The different effects just look a lot more realistic, which is great. We'll plug in our main render layer, and then let's look at the glare output. We don't want the streaks. We're going to use bloom. And yeah, I think we want the bloom. I know fog glow, we got fog in our scene. That actually looks pretty cool though. I think I used bloom for the final shot. Let's roll with this for the time being. We're going to composite this in after we readjust the gamma, and we're going to use an add node. And we're just going to hook up that there. Okay, so that's the fog glow. And then let's give you, I'll let you guys tell me what you like. We got the fog glow, and we also have bloom. Let's hook this up. And that's way too powerful, of course. We can turn down the strength here, but I actually prefer to turn on the strength on the factor. It just, to me, I'm accessing this node more. And let me turn down the exposure on our scene, and let's turn on a look. Let's get some punchy contrast going here. And now we're really seeing, so this is really starting to shape up, especially once we add the glow in. This is starting to look pretty cool. What does the size do? Oh, yeah, we want the bloom size. Okay. I'll turn this up decent amount. Get that kind of going across the image. Let's see what that does. Nice. That looks pretty sweet. Now, another thing you'll see that happens when we added in this glow is before the glow, it looked like the black levels on our VFX elements here, this main element, these black levels are a little bit too dark, but I didn't correct those because I've already made this shot before, and so I know that adding in this glow actually raises those levels up. Now, I think I still might want to increase the black levels here before the glow is added. So let's do that really quick. We're going to go with, oh, you like the fog glow more. Let me reconsider this. Oh, we gotta go, we gotta take up this factor. We'll go fog glow versus, wait, we want this to go here. We want this to go here. Okay, that's the, well, that's a little bit too big. Let me take down the size here. There we go. Okay. What do you guys think? Bloom versus fog glow. And maybe the fog glow needs to be bigger. Ooh. Wow. Wow. I don't know. I could be convinced. This is definitely giving more like density around the light source. Fago looks cooler. What do you think? What do you think? Let me know. I'm gonna keep going. Switch to aces. Why are you using AGX? You can use whatever you want. AGX is, I mean, when you say switch to aces, I assume you mean with the view transform. There's aces 1.3. Here's aces 2.0. When it comes to choosing your view transform, all the way bloom. Ooh, mix them. It's a good idea. Sorry, got sidetracked. Talking about aces in this view transform. When it comes to choosing this is an aesthetic choice. The view transform is basically the technique that Blender is using, the algorithm that Blender, or the calculation that Blender uses to get from our large working color space, and it compresses all of that luminance and color data down into a range that fits on our display, a 0 to 1 range, or a bit higher if you're working on a HDR display. But that's the idea. And so there's not a correct or incorrect view transform to use. If you like the look of Aces 2.0, great. I like the look of AGX. And I also like to add a punchy contrast on top. Any of these adjustments that we're making over here in our color management, these are happening these are not affecting our underlying linear compositing data, linear color data that we're compositing with. So these are creative adjustments, and the exposure and gamma controls that you've seen me fiddling with, these are just preview, just for preview only. If we rendered out this scene, these would not be applied to the image. Yeah, so that's why I like to use AGX. Mixing, let's try mixing this. So let's add an add node here, mix them together. And we can control how much they're mixed together with this factor slider. And then we'll add them both into the composite here. All right, so currently we're adjusting how much bloom, this factor adjusts how much bloom is being added into the scene. And the fog glow is there by default. I think that looks pretty good. I actually like that a lot. That was a good idea. Murdo VFX, great suggestion. What do you all think? I think that's looking nice. Okay. What did I want to do? I wanted to adjust the levels of this main VFX element. I want to raise these black levels a bit to get them to match better. So let me get organized here just a little bit. Good to have a nice, neat graph. We got our noise. Let's add a curves adjustment. And now if we increase this lower left point is the black point. If we raise this up, you'll see that this raises the black levels of our VFX element, but it also affects the entire shot, which is not what we want. And so anytime you are trying to adjust, you're trying to apply a color correction operation to your VFX elements, and it's affecting the entire shot, the main thing you need to do is control your alpha channel. Specifically alpha pre-multiplication and unpremultiplication, which is a kind of complicated concept, but basically add an alpha convert node, go to straight, you'll put this before your adjustment, duplicate this after the adjustment, and convert it to pre-multiplied so that this is kind of sandwiched in these alpha convert nodes. And now you'll see that this is only affecting the, only affecting what we want it to. So of course this, you'll see that when you're changing the black levels, the smallest changes make the hugest difference. So you don't need to do much. We'll take this down quite a bit. Even 0.01 is too much. So let's turn this off and then on again. And I also am noticing that these black areas in our footage are a bit warm. You know, we got that warm tone going throughout it. So I'm going to come to the red channel and I'm just going to increase that a bit. And that might have been a little bit too much. You can see, let me actually just expand this so we can see these values. Nice and big. Yeah, you can see how little we need to do to really make a change here. And this, now I think we need some green. Too much green. I don't think that's what we wanted. Let's try blue. And we want to make sure that we are changing the lower left points here, because we're changing the black levels. And that's not exactly what we want either. Now this is one point at which Blender's tools show their limitations a little bit. I guess, you know what, we can actually do, I don't know why I'm using this RGB curves node. We can also use a color balance node, and that might be a lot better way to do this same adjustment. Let's mute this. And the lift, basically what we're doing in this node is we're lifting up that black point, and so that's the same thing as using a lift adjustment. So let's increase this. Let's see, what do we have this set to? 0.001. So we can lift this 0.001. Oh, 0.001. And there we go. Okay, so that's lifting up a little bit. And now we can come into the lift color. Basically, this overall lift slider, you can think of this as changing the RGB channels together. If you want to actually change, so that'll change the exposure, the levels of the image. If you want to change the color balance, you want to use these actual color inputs. So we've kind of set the levels a little bit better on the black point, and now we want to adjust the color balance, and we're trying to get this a bit more warm. Oh my gosh. Less is more, less is more. Okay, we need to do this in smaller increments here. All right. So that's pushing us beyond, but now let's adjust the hue. I know I'm being really nitpicky with these black levels. Again, we have our exposure on our preview turned up, so any inconsistencies are going to be really magnified, so we're being really hard on ourselves. And if you're just starting out, don't go to this level of detail. Like it's just, unless you really want to and you're having fun. But if this is overwhelming and this seems like too much, then it's okay. You know, this will be fine without this level of compositing detail. How much did you miss? You missed what? 2.5 hours, but the stream will be up afterwards, so you can join, or you can rewatch it. And that, it's looking kind of green. And I think, okay, come up here. We're gonna stop doing this in just a sec. This is one thing, you know, where if I'm not doing this live, I would sit here and tweak these things till the cows come in. But at some point we're gonna have to call this good enough for this stream. And you know, we should be going to RGB mode. I think this is what we've been missing. Oh my gosh. Doesn't take much. Is that helping? It's helping. It's not there. I think that's actually pretty good. I think I just needed to lift up the overall gain. Now you'll notice that our shadows on the ground do not look great. And that's because they're too dark right now. In all reality, when we preview this with the final exposure and everything, that doesn't really impact us as much. We don't really notice it. Let's take that off. Where did our... Oh, we're losing some of the noise, but I guess that makes some sense. Yeah. Another thing we can do is we can just... The controls are too sensitive. Yeah, I don't know. They weren't really maybe made for that level of detail, but I don't know if that's their fault, the controls' fault. Let's add a bit of blur to our CG elements here before they're comped in, just by adding a blur node. And we're going to increase this just slightly. Is this... Okay. Why is this? Okay, now we're getting somewhere. I'm going to take this down. I guess we'll go back to 0.5. And that's just because most lenses have a bit of blur to them. And so if you think about here, these two things that we're doing, adding blur and adding noise, we're trying to recreate the effects, the visual effects, the imperfections of our real world camera. So we're blurring out this element because our real camera, the lens usually has some field curvature, which is just a overall blurring of the image. And then cameras also have noise that the sensor creates in the final image. So these two things, we're just trying to recreate some of those real world imperfections. And this is looking pretty good. Let me go back. I think the last thing we're going to do is we're going to... Yeah, let me just show you one technique for getting these shadows, like these contact shadows, right around the object. Let me show you how to get these sitting in a better level. What I found worked well was what did I do? After the shadows were multiplied on top of the footage, I took a mix color node and I can set this factor to 1, and we'll set this to lighten. And then we're gonna use this. We'll view the composite at this point, and then we'll use our color picker, and we'll sample this dark area of the shadow. And now you'll see that lightens our image and brings up the darkness of the shadow there. And we're gonna have to make a mask to control where that happens. Okay. So actually what I wanna do is view the composite here. And then I'm going to use this color. I'm just gonna select this area. And now you can see that's matching a lot better. One thing I want to do is I want to make sure that there's some noise in these shadows, because we added noise to our main VFX elements. Let's get some noise in the shadows. To do that, let's duplicate the sensor noise. Let's create some more room here. And let's see, we need this constant out here. I don't think this is going to work. Oh, if we do this, if we run this, into this, I don't think, yeah, we don't get a noisy image. So one workaround, which is just a kind of a hack, is to just add an alpha over node. Not set alpha, alpha over. Put this color in the foreground and our just pretty much anything in the background. And now that allows this sensor noise to actually create noise on this constant color, so that now if we view this, we're getting a much better blend between the VFX elements and the shadow, the contact shadow area. But also, when we did this lighten operation, we're doing this across the entire image, and we only want this to just be on this area right below our main VFX elements. So let's mask this out. Let's go back to the mask mode. Let's create a new mask. We'll call this shadow. And then we'll draw out. I don't use the masking tools in Blender very much. They are kind of funky, just with how the splines work. I've never seen any other program that uses a technique, a spline technique like this, but I guess it works. We'll feather this out a bit, and then we want to make sure that we're keyframing the shape of this mask so that it follows throughout the shot. Why don't you remove the chrome parts of the cars? They're giving wrong reflections. Yeah, the cars are reflecting the main element here. And again, I said this earlier, we didn't use the exact car models, so you can see some things aren't lining up. But yeah. Sorry, let's finish what we were doing. We're masking out this area. So we got this mask made here. It's called shadow. Let's add a mask input. Plug this into the factor and make sure that we have the shadow mask selected. So now this is only affecting that area. And now we just need to keyframe this mask throughout the shot. We'll hit I. And well, this is going to be hard to keyframe since we don't have the full shot rendered. But yeah, you can kind of imagine how that would look. And I'll show you, I rendered out this full shot, and I'll swap that out and I'll show you how this looks. We'll come back to this. But let's go back to frame 48, the frame that we rendered on. And I think our glow might be a little bit strong. I also should be making sure that I'm using GPU for my compositor. That'll run a little bit faster. Okay, glow is strong. Yep. Let's take this down. Why are we not? Yeah. It looks better. Maybe more fog or more bloom. Nice. Yeah. Well, let me just check something. Let me just check something here. Do I have, so let me catch up on the chat here. Do I have tutorials on how to match the real shadows and the fake shadows, or especially when they're overlapping? That's a great question. There is a really good tutorial by, let me grab it for you right here. Compositing Academy. You might have heard of his channel. He's got some great stuff. And if you look up Compositing Academy Double Shadow, I'll send you the link right now. But that's a good tutorial. There you go. Do I have industry experience? I have worked as a freelancer. I've never worked at a studio, a visual effects studio. I am mostly self-taught and have learned, just a ton online, and just tons of trial and error, and also really have been lucky to be surrounded by a lot of people in the industry who have taught me so much. And so they've helped me learn a lot of these techniques, and now I get to share them with you guys. So that is how I've gotten into all of this. Okay, now let's see. I think we're looking pretty good here. I did want to check one thing in my final. We're going to be wrapping this up pretty soon, I think. By the way, if you're just joining the stream, you can download the footage for this shot at the link below. Follow along, and I'd love to see if you remake this shot yourself. It'd be fun to see what you make. I'm just checking my other final composite, and I have this alpha overnode that's going there. Okay, so that is set to lighten. Nice. Cool. What else do we want to do here? I think what I want to do is, this is pretty, I'd say this is pretty close to being final. Let's go back. Let's render out one of these later frames. I want to turn this ground shadow catcher back on. And let's make sure that our sci-fi generator is back on. We want to take away that render region. And also, that's fine. We'll go around there. We'll render this out. What is the roadmap for a VFX artist? That's a great question. I mean, it kind of depends what you want to do in the industry. And I think a lot of things are changing right now too with AI. If you want to be a compositor, yeah, I guess you would focus on compositing. It has been something that I wanted to do, is put together a proper roadmap for people to look at. Maybe put it into like an article of sorts. And so maybe that's something I will do here soon, and I can share that with you. There's a reason I'm not comping in Fusion or Nuke. It's just because I really want to make my life tough. And I want to show you the capabilities of Blender, and also focus on the fundamental compositing tools, and show you that you can achieve a lot with really basic tools. But definitely day-to-day compositing in Fusion and Nuke, way better. Just better quality of life if you're doing this a lot. But I like to teach in Blender, and it's also just easier to composite while we're rendering at the same time, and to go back and forth that way. So I got this frame rendered out. I need to change where this shadow mask is showing up. You see that blends that in there, and we're going to keyframe that there. Again, once you render out this full shot, you would want to keyframe this mask throughout the full shot. And you'd also want to do the same thing for that other mask we created for the ground. Now, one little bonus tip I'll share with you: instead of keyframing masks, what you can also do, let me just create a new one here. We'll just create a random mask. If we come into our motion tracking, and let's go to the mask area, and we have the random mask that we just created, we can actually parent this to a tracking marker by selecting the mask by hitting A to select all of the mask points, then select a tracking marker and hit Command P, and that will parent the mask to that marker. And that did not happen. Oh, Control P. There we go. Maybe not. Or is that just because I'm locked here? Yes, it is working. Was it Command or Control? One of those. And your mask will be tracked and sticking to that marker. Another thing you can do is, let me undo that so that we're not parented. Okay, there we go. Another thing we can do is we can select 4 tracking markers that are on a certain plane, and we can go to mask. How does this work again? I don't do this much. We need to create a planar track. Let's go to tracking, track. Where's the planar tracker? Create plane track. There we go. And that's just going to create this kind of flat plane that's going to move a little bit more accurately than just a single tracking marker. And so we can go back to our mask, select the mask, select the planar track, and then we can parent them. And now you can see that's sticking better in our scene. And so we could do this for the shadow mask, but I'm not going to do that right now since we've only rendered out individual frames. Okay, so let's go back to the shadow. Oh, we need to go back to the right frame. And this is looking pretty awesome. One last thing that I want to do is maybe add some light wrap from the main scene. So let me show you what that's going to look like. I'm going to turn off our contrast here for a second too. Now also, I feel like I want less of our fog glow. As much as I like it, it's just, I don't love how it's pinging around those elements. It's decent. It's decent. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. What was I going to do? I was going to... Oh. What was I going to do? We have the... Oh, we're doing light wrap. It's getting to be a long stream. We're going to wrap up soon because I think my brain is near its end. But to do some light wrap on these elements, we're going to take the alpha matte and then we're going to invert it. And then we're going to blur this out. You'll see what this is going to do in just a little bit. We want to blur it in both directions, quite a bit. And then we're going to add a mix color node. And we'll multiply this blurred mask by the original alpha channel. And that's going to give us this. So we essentially have this light coming in from the edges. We multiplied this times this to get this. And the amount of blur here will impact how far that bloom or that light wrap comes over the edges. And we can adjust this in just a bit. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come back to our original footage. We're going to add a luma key. We'll just set this off to the side. We're going to make our max like 2, or our minimum 2, and our max we can make, yeah, something like that. So what this is doing is it's just cutting out the brightest parts of our footage, which is our light sources. So now what we can do is we can blur this out. We got to blur this out a lot. There we go. So now this is the light that we want seeping in to the this mask. So all we have to do is multiply them together now. And I'm sorry this tree is getting a little bit disjointed, but hopefully you're tracking with this. So this is what we get. We multiply this times this, and we get this. You can see that. Let me change the inputs here, which doesn't really matter, but yeah, actually the other way was fine. There we go. So now we get this light wrapping over the edges, and the nice thing about this effect is that it's completely procedural. We don't need to track anything into the shot. This is just going to work just right off the without any animation. So now let's take this and we're going to add this into the shot right on top of things. So you can see what that's doing there. It's just kind of allowing this light to spill over, and it's giving this interactive lighting where it looks like the fog is impacting and wrapping around this object a little bit more, which is nice. And another thing we actually need to do to make this a bit more accurate is we don't want to see these light sources if they are showing up behind this alpha matte. So before we blur out these lights, we want to add another multiply node, and we want to multiply this by the inverted alpha matte. So you see all that's doing is it's cutting out those lights, and then we blur this out. And why is that doing so much right there? Oh, we don't want to clamp result. That's really important. Don't clamp result. Wow, we got to make sure that's true across the board, especially when we're multiplying. Okay, good. you can see that just cuts out those light sources that are behind that VFX element, and that's good because we don't want those spilling on top. And yeah. Let's turn this off just so we can see this alone. And right now this is the main light source that we're seeing being impacted here. Okay. I think that's like most of the tips and compositing knowledge that I can offload onto y'all. Like I said, if you were doing this yourself, you know, you could spend a lot more time tweaking things, going back to different parts of the workflow, making sure that objects are lined up better. But hopefully this gave you a pretty good understanding of how this shot comes to life. Let me just show you the final composite file that I made here. Rendered it at full resolution. Okay, so before we do that, basically once you're ready to render out your full shot, we don't want to render out everything composited together. We first just want to render out the individual render layers that we've created, because then we can control the compositing more after that render has been made. So to do that, I just create a render layers node here, link this up. The most important thing is that this is connected to the group output node. This controls what is exported from Blender when we render the animation. So you need to make sure that when you're rendering this 3D scene, you have a render layers node connected to the group output. And also, it doesn't really matter what render layer is selected here. It's going to render all of them out, don't worry, as long as you have one selected that is actually enabled in your scene. So you'll have that selected there. Then, of course, you'd also want to make sure your render settings are in the place that you want them to be. So, you know, you'd set the noise threshold to something lower, and, you know, you could tweak and optimize the rest of these settings. And then you would render out a full EXR sequence. So in this output properties, for the format, or for the media type, we'll choose multi-layer EXR. And that's because we have multiple render layers that we want to export. And so we need to choose the multi-layer EXR, not just the regular EXR. And I'm sorry, my head is probably covering this just a little bit. Let me help you out there. We have, so we want multi-layer EXR. Color depth, half is good. DWAA for the compression is great. 45% quality, I mean, you can play with that. And then you would just hit render animation, and this would render out an EXR sequence for you that you could then bring back into Blender. So yeah, this renders out an EXR sequence. Then we jump over to this file, which is the final composite that I made. And you can see here, I have the original render layers nodes that I was using while I was setting up the scene. And then here is the EXR sequence that I rendered from Blender. And so all I've done is I've simply switched out the image, these inputs from this node to this node. And you can see in this file, I have this switch node, which is basically, you can add a switch, or switch in utilities. You can add this switch node, which basically allows you to add two inputs. So this is my combined output that has been rendered out, and this is the combined output that is from the actual file as I'm working. So oftentimes, the reason I'm doing this is because oftentimes when I'm compositing a final shot, if I'm doing it in Blender, I want to switch between rendering things in this current file, and so I would use this render layers node, and maybe I want to switch back to a pre-rendered image, in which case I would want to use this node. And so this switch just allows me to switch between those more easily without having to like reconnect these up. And so what I've done, one thing I like to do is to select this switch node, hit Shift G, or actually Control G, put this in a group, and then take off this switch input so that now if I duplicate this group anywhere in my scene, I can go into the group by hitting tab, and I can toggle this switch, and this will switch the inputs for the entire scene. So this allows me to switch between the pre-rendered EXR sequence versus the pre-rendered EXR sequence and the current file. So that's why I have this labeled as pre-rendered and current file. So for now, we want to use the pre-rendered sequence. So we want to make sure the switch is turned off. So that's set correctly. Delete all this. Yeah, so I just wanted to show you that. Hopefully that made some sense. I don't think I really explained that the best way. But yeah, this is the final composite. You can see now that I've rendered out the scene, I can actually move to different frames, and this makes it a lot easier to see how the whole shot is meshing. And again, this is when you'd come back to your masks and more easily be able to animate the position of them to make sure they're in the right place. Because now we can actually, yeah, move through the shot, make sure the timing and everything is playing out correctly. Okay, so say you have, well, let me take a break right there real quickly before we do final export and color grading. How is everyone doing? Some of you are still hanging in there with me. Thanks for hanging out. By the way, if you're watching this stream, I have a Blender VFX course, and it's going to be 50% off tomorrow, January 2nd. So depending on when you're watching this, it might have already been over. But if you're interested in this stuff and you want to learn it at a really deep level and get really good at this, then I would highly recommend my course. Of course, I'm going to say that. But the course will be on sale tomorrow, 50% off. If you're curious to get the course, or you're curious about details for the sale, click the first link below, or might be the second link. Enter your email. I'll send you the details for the sale so you don't miss out. But this is basically what the course looks like. If you actually wind up taking it, you'll have access to this website. This is the learning platform. There are these core lessons, which are 15 lessons that cover each step of the workflow, most of the steps that we've talked about today, of course, in a lot more detail so that you can actually understand things. And then there's other parts that we haven't talked about covered in here. And then in addition to these lessons, there are 4 case study projects, basically visual effects shots that look like this. And I take you from start to finish. And it's a great way for us to learn how the fundamentals are applied on in a real project. And so that's kind of how the course is structured. I would love, I love seeing people in the course, and have just had a lot of fun teaching this stuff and putting together the course. So consider checking that out. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can check it out. If you find it's too advanced for you or not what you're into, no worries. I'll refund you that full amount. Okay, so we will see you later. Thanks for tuning in from Brazil. I'm glad that you watched, and yes, the stream will be up tomorrow if you want to catch the rest of it. Does the course cover using your iPhone? Yeah, so in the course we talk about how to use footage from all different types of cameras, from a cinema camera to a cell phone. And we talk about how to do color management with those different types of files. And so yeah, you'll learn how to use footage from your iPhone properly in this workflow. Also, depending on what iPhone you have, if it can record in Apple Log, that's even better, and you'll learn how to make the most of that in this course. So yeah, there's that. Okay, so getting back to the shot here. Once we're done with our full composite in Blender, we want to render all of this out together. And so what we would do is, again, we want to make sure that whatever we want to render out of Blender is connected to the group output node. And then for our final render, we are going to export this as an EXR sequence. So we're going to choose EXR as the file format. And then, yeah, then we can just hit, oh, another thing we want to do, when we render out this final composite, since we're using these pre-rendered render layers, we don't want to use the render layers. We don't want Blender to re-render the 3D scene. We're pretty much only using Blender for the compositor at this point. And you'll see if I hit render image, Blender is going to re-render the main 3D scene, which is going to take a long time. And so we don't want this to happen. Since we already rendered this out, we just want Blender to compute our full composite here and render out and save out the result. So to make it so that Blender doesn't render out the 3D scene, we just need to make sure that we select all the render layers nodes in this composite, and we need to make sure that they're turned off. So you can select one, hit M to turn it off. To make this easier, select one, hit Shift G, and we can select all of them that are the same type. Now, this only really works if they're set to the same, if they're all set to be on or they're all set to be off. Currently, you can see that they kind of oscillate back and forth. So I'll just select this one and I'll turn it off. And I'll select this one and make sure it's turned off as well. Okay, now all of them should be off. And now if we render this image, you'll see it just renders out what we have in the compositor, which is exactly what we want. And then we would go ahead and we would hit render animation, and that would render out this full shot. And it would be an EXR sequence that we would then bring into DaVinci Resolve. So we started this whole workflow with DaVinci Resolve. Now we're coming back to DaVinci Resolve in the very end. And let's see. We have, this is the full composite that we would have rendered out of Blender. So this is what you would get when you bring in that EXR sequence that we just would have rendered out of Blender. We bring it into Resolve, drag it into the timeline. It looks really terrible. And the reason that is because this EXR sequence contains color data that is in our working color space, which is Linear Rec 2020. And we're never meant to view linear color data directly on a standard display. So we need to do some sort of color space transform. And while we've been working in Blender, that's been handled by these settings down here. You'll see if I turn my view to raw, that's essentially what we're seeing. That's the same thing that we're seeing here in DaVinci Resolve. And so in Resolve, we need to figure out a way to recreate this color space transform that's converting our data into the sRGB color space using some sort of tone mapping. Here in Blender, we're using AGX tone mapping. Remember, I said tone mapping is just an aesthetic choice. I mean, some people will argue that certain tone mapping methods are more correct than others. But at the end of the day, if you like the look of ACES 2.0 or ACES 1.3 or AGX better, then go for it. That's not right or wrong. But all that being said, we want to recreate this kind of color transformation process that we have here in Blender in DaVinci Resolve. So to do that, we'll come to the color page. For our first node, we are going to convert this from our working color space, which is going to be Rec 2020 for the gamut, linear for the transfer function. And we're going to convert this into DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate. Why are we doing this? What is DaVinci Wide Gamut? What is DaVinci Intermediate? This is a different working color space that is good for color grading. It has a log transfer function instead of a linear transfer function. And log transfer functions just allow color grading tools to operate in a more intuitive way. And that's not true of all tools, but across the board, this is a good color space to do color grading in. So that's why we're converting it into this color space to begin with. Now, as you can see, this still looks like trash. So that's because we still need an output color space transform. So we will copy this first color space transform, paste it here. And here we want to go from DaVinci Wide Gamut to something like Rec 709, Gamma 2.2. And again, we want some sort of tone mapping involved in this process. And we'll use a custom max input like that. And we want to apply our tone mapping. Now this looks wrong. What's going on here? Linear Rec 2020, DaVinci Wide Gamut. Oh, on this first node, we don't want to do any tone mapping. There we go. We only want to do tone mapping when we go to our final display color space transform, or when we convert the colors from our working color space to our final display color space. And so that's why we're enabling tone mapping here. Again, just like in Blender, how we have all these different tone mapping options, DaVinci Resolve has its own tone mapping methods. And so the DaVinci method is one of them that works pretty well. The luminance mapping method is a different one, and you'll see these all have different looks. Again, there's no right or wrong. Which one do you like the look of? That's basically what you have to ask yourself. Now, if you want to get AGX tone mapping here in DaVinci Resolve, we need to use a different node than this node. We need to use the OCIO color space transform node. And to use this, we're going to go to browse, and we need to find a OCIO config file. We need to find the same one that we're using in Blender. So I'm going to come into Finder. I'm going to create a new Finder window here, and I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm just going to find the Blender version that I'm using. I'm going to go to Show Package Contents, go into Contents, Mac OS, Resources, the version number, Data Files, Color Management, and here you'll see this config.ocio file. You don't really need to worry exactly what this does, but this just tells Blender and whatever program that references this file what sort of color spaces exist and how to convert between different color spaces. So let's drag this into the browser in DaVinci Resolve, and we'll open this up. And now for our source color space, we want to choose DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, because that's the color space that we're in with this node. But you see that's not an option on this list. So we need to actually we need to add another color space transform before this. We need to go from DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate back to Linear Rec 2020, so that now on this node we can go from Linear Rec 2020 to AGX. And now if we connect this up, boom, we have recreated what we're seeing here in Blender with that AGX tone mapping applied. Okay, so now if we wanted to do some color grading, we could come in here. I need to delete this other process. And we could really have some fun here, get crazy with it. This is probably not the type of crazy that we want. One fun tool that I like to use, I mean, this is not going to be a proper color grading tutorial, but this color warper tab is kind of fun, and you can select, let's see, you can select different colors in your image, and then you can kind of warp them around, and this can change. So I'm just changing those orange tones. Or I could do the same thing for the blue area here. And this is just more of like a stylistic, a way to get some more style in the shot. You can add some saturation by dragging these points outwards, and you can see what that's doing there. Now, you might notice when you're using this OCIO color space transform effect, it does not run the fastest in Resolve. If I turn it off, you'll see things, I can play back normally. If I turn it on, things get pretty laggy. And so that's one reason why I don't always love to use it. The actual output color space transform that I used for this shot was it's called basically in Resolve, you can use something called a DCTL, which is only available in the paid version of DaVinci Resolve. But this is kind of a script that you can run, or this effect allows you to run different scripts that people can write. And this one in particular, JP2499, is just another output color space transform process and tone mapping algorithm that a lot of people, especially like pro colorists, really like the look of. And so I can use this and I can kind of circumnavigate these nodes here. And so you can see just the differences in the look. Again, no right or wrong, but this, I do like this just because this node runs a bit more quickly than the OCIO color space effect. But of course, if you're working with a client, or if you really need that AG and you really like that AGX tone mapping look, this is how you would set it up in DaVinci Resolve. Okay, if we're done with color grading, the final step is to, of course, just export a full render of the final shot. And for that, we are going to just come to the deliver page, choose a format like MP4, name out the file, add this to the render queue, and render this out. And we would get something like that. And that is the full process of this workflow. And we got there in about 4 hours. I hope this video is helpful if you're rewatching this. This has been very long. I had no idea how long this would take. Thank you all for tuning in. And I guess I'll spend the rest of the time here, just a few minutes. I'm happy to answer any questions. Let me read back the chat. After buying the course, can you download it locally? All the lessons are only accessible through this website. So, no. You're saying try 2 different renders with different color management, tone mapping from Blender and bring them into Fusion. I believe it does change the render itself. It shouldn't. Basically, I mean, it's potential that there's a bug if you're seeing that. But when you render out an EXR file from Blender, basically, if we look at these color management settings, by default, it says follow scene. But if we click override, we can see what that default setting is. And that's linear rec 2020. And so that means we're exporting, oh, sorry, not showing the screen. Here I am in these color management settings in the output properties tab. If we're exporting an EXR sequence, by default, the color management is set to follow scene. If we click on override, we can see what that default is. It's linear rec 2020. And basically what that means is that we are exporting a file that is in the working color space, and there's none of this output color space, none of this process is affecting the color data in that file. These settings are here purely for us in Blender to be able to preview this composite so that it looks nice, because otherwise we would just be looking at something like this. But remember, this is actually what we're rendering out of Blender. So, like I said, it might be a thing that somehow these are affecting how these nodes perform in the compositor. I mean, that shouldn't be happening. But yeah, these settings really should not affect the color data that you're getting in an EXR file that you render out of Blender. The sale will be live tomorrow morning at, so that's Friday, January 2nd, depending on when you're watching this, at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. So that's, yeah, you can look that up, hopefully convert that. If you go to my Instagram, instagram.com/InlightVFX, I can send a link here. I just posted a story a few years ago, or a few hours ago, with a little countdown timer so that you can actually see how much time is left, and that can maybe help you sync up the time. I didn't really send as a link, but that's there. Yeah, any more questions? Otherwise, thank you all for tuning in. Do you recommend any add-ons for Blender? Well, today I showed the use of this Blender Kit add-on, which I love for bringing different assets into Blender. If you don't know about Blender Kit, it's a great library that you can access online, but it's really nice and easy. If you just download their add-on, you can just drag things right in from Blender right into your scene, which is really cool. Another add-on that I talked about today was this, where is it? Oh, I don't think it's in this version of Blender. It's in this one. Too many versions of Blender open. This stabilized viewport add-on is pretty sweet. I can select an object, enable the stabilization, and the viewport will be stabilized on whatever I select. And that's just a really nice way to tell, you know, if I'm lining up, I'm trying to line up where different things are. This is just a great way to really be able to analyze if things are sticking in the right position. Oh shoot, can't see the screen. Man, I gotta put this screen that I'm actually monitoring the stream on closer to my line of sight. Sorry, okay, stabilized viewport is this add-on. Gosh darn it. Keep wasting your time, I'm sorry. Yeah, so you can see this locks the viewport to the element that I have selected. And that just allows me to really analyze if this is in the right place. Super helpful when we're doing that reconstruction process to make sure that things are sticking. And then also I mentioned this Blender Kit add-on, which allows me to drag assets right into the viewport. And that is accessing the Blender Kit library, which is online. Has a ton of great models, free and paid. Highly recommend checking out that add-on. The exposure and gamma settings do transfer into the EXR. Well, that's interesting. It doesn't seem right, but also Blender 5.0 is new, and maybe that's a new, yeah, has that just been happening in Blender 5.0, or have you noticed that before? I'd be curious. Yeah, these settings should not be changing what you're rendering out of Blender. If you're using an EXR, again, I should clarify, if you're rendering the EXR file type, these settings should not be applied to your output. If you're rendering a file type like PNG, you'll see in the color management settings by default, these are being applied. You can see they're grayed out, but if you click override, these are the default settings. And these are set based on these settings here. So it depends on the file type that you're using. EXR sequence, you can see by default, we're just rendering in Linear Rec 2020, which means these should not be affecting the render. But if you're rendering out a PNG or basically any format that is designed to capture a final image, then those will affect what you save out. It's confusing. It's confusing. You have a process for creating reference geometry for VFX. I assume you mean like this geometry. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you watched the stream earlier, but I talked about some techniques to create these objects and line them up in the right place. Other than that, I find that for most VFX shots, very basic modeling skills is all that is required to recreate objects and to reconstruct things. So for example, let's say we want to reconstruct this pole here. I can just create a cylinder, rotate this. I described this technique earlier in the stream. We'll scale this up on the Z-axis. And now this is aligned on this one frame. And you'll see, so frame 57 is where we're lined up. If we move to a different frame, it's kind of sliding. So this is really not in the right place in 3D space. But the technique that I like to use is selecting the camera, hit Shift S, cursor to active, rotate around that 3D cursor, and then move to a different frame, and then scale the object till it lines back up. And that essentially changes the position of the object so that it actually sticks in the right place. If none of that made sense, go back and watch earlier in the stream where I talk about that technique. But yeah, this is basically a way that we are setting the position and reconstructing the geometry. Okay. Cool. Well, I think the thing that's going to do it for me, this has been great. I hope to do more of these. So if you like this, let me know in the comments. Definitely check out my VFX course. Sale happening tomorrow, 50% off. And that's only for the first 100 people, by the way. So if you want it, make sure you're there right when it goes live. Click the link in the description. And if you subscribe to my email list, I'll send you the full details for the sale. Other than that, Happy New Year. Thank you for hanging out. I hope 2026 is filled with more live streams like this. And hopefully, let me increase. There we go. Hopefully we can hang out more. Yeah, this was fun. I hope you got a lot out of it. And we will see you all in a future video, future live stream. I'm hoping to get back to making more of my normal tutorials. I just finished the course, and that was what I was focusing on for the last year and a half. So it's been a long road. I'm really happy to have it finished, excited to be able to do things like this now. And yeah, I'm just here excited to help you guys on your learning journey. So thanks for joining me. Happy